close your eyes now and let me tell you the real story of human evolution. The story they never taught you in school. The story that is far stranger and more fascinating than the simple version you learned from textbooks and documentaries. You were told that humans evolved from apes in a straight line, that we gradually stood upright, lost our hair, grew bigger brains, and became the intelligent beings we are today. You were shown that famous image of a hunched ape on the left gradually transforming into an upright modern human on the right, as if evolution were a simple march of progress from primitive to advanced. But that image is wrong. That story is incomplete. And tonight, I am going to tell you what they left out, what they glossed over, what they did not want to complicate your understanding with. The real story of human evolution is messier, more mysterious, more wonderful, and more unsettling than anything you were taught. It involves not one human species but dozens, not a straight line but a tangled bush, not a triumphant march but a desperate struggle for survival that we nearly lost again and again. It involves interbreeding between species, cannibalism, near-extinction events, and mysteries that science still cannot explain. It involves you, your body, your mind, your fears and desires and quirks, all of which carry the marks of this strange evolutionary journey. By the time you drift off to sleep tonight, you will understand your own existence differently. You will know why your body does strange things, why your mind works in peculiar ways, why you're afraid of certain things and drawn to others. You will know the real story of how you came to be, and that story is far more interesting than anything they taught you in school. Before we begin this journey through the hidden history of human evolution, I want to let you know that if you enjoy these sleep stories, if they help you relax and drift off while learning something fascinating about our world, please consider subscribing to the channel and leaving a like on this video. It helps more than you know, and it allows me to keep creating these long, detailed stories that carry you through the night. Now, let us begin with the first thing they never told you about human evolution. The first thing they do not teach you is that there was no single moment when humans appeared. There was no first human, no clear line between human and not human, no birthday for our species. Evolution does not work that way. It works through countless tiny changes accumulating over millions of years, each generation slightly different from the one before, none of them aware that they were part of a transformation that would eventually produce something new. If you could travel back in time and line up all your ancestors, parent behind parent behind parent, stretching back millions of years, you would never find a point where you could draw a line and say, here, on this side, is a human, and there, on the other side, is not a human. Every individual in that line would look almost identical to their parents and almost identical to their children. The changes would be imperceptible from one generation to the next, and yet, over thousands of generations, those imperceptible changes would accumulate into something dramatic, transforming a small ape living in African trees into you, lying here tonight, listening to these words, aware of your own existence in a way that no other species has ever been. This gradual nature of evolution is the first thing they gloss over, because it is harder to teach, harder to grasp, harder to fit into simple narratives, but it is essential to understanding what we really are. Not a sudden creation, but an ongoing process. Not a finished product, but a work in progress. Not separate from other animals, but continuous with them. Connected by an unbroken chain of birth stretching back billions of years to the first living cell. The second thing they do not teach you is how many different human species there were. When most people think of human evolution, they think of modern humans and maybe Neanderthals, perhaps with a vague awareness that there were some other primitive ancestors along the way. But the reality is far more complex and far more fascinating. Over the last 7 million years, since our lineage split from the lineage that would become chimpanzees, there have been at least 20 different species of hominins, the scientific term for humans, and our close evolutionary relatives. 20 different experiments in being human, 20 different ways of walking and thinking and living, 20 different answers to the question of what it means to be a creature like us. Most of these species are known only from fragments. A jawbone here, a tooth there, a partial skull that scientists have painstakingly reconstructed. Some of them we know quite well, from abundant fossils and even preserved DNA. But all of them were real as you and me, living their lives, raising their children, struggling to survive in a world that was constantly changing around them. and all of them, except one, are gone. We are the last survivors of a once diverse family, the only remaining twig on a branch that once held many. Understanding why we survived when all the others perished is one of the great mysteries of human evolution, and it is something they rarely discuss in the simple version of the story. Let me tell you about some of these other human species, these relatives you never knew you had. There was Homo erectus, perhaps the most successful human species that ever lived, surviving for nearly 2 million years, far longer than our own species has existed. Homo erectus spread out of Africa and across Asia, adapting to environments ranging from tropical forests to temperate woodlands. They controlled fire, made sophisticated tools, and may have been the first humans to cook their food regularly. They had brains about 2/3 the size of ours, bodies nearly as tall as modern humans, and a way of life that worked so well it persisted for 100,000 generations. When we think of human evolution, we tend to think of it as leading inevitably to us, but for most of the last 2 million years, if you had asked which human species was most likely to inherit the Earth, the smart money would have been on Homo erectus. They were everywhere, they were successful. They were us, in many ways, just an earlier version, and then they disappeared, replaced by newer species, including eventually our own, their long success story ending in extinction like all the others. There were the Neanderthals, our closest relatives, so similar to us that we interbred with them and carry their DNA in our cells to this day. The Neanderthals evolved in Europe and Western Asia, adapting to the cold climates of the Ice Ages, developing stocky bodies and large noses that warmed the frigid air before it reached their lungs. They had brains as large as ours, sometimes larger, and they lived in ways that suggest intelligence and culture. They buried their dead, they cared for their sick and injured, they made tools and weapons of remarkable sophistication. They were not the brutish cavemen of popular imagination, but a highly successful human species that thrived for hundreds of thousands of years in some of the harshest environments on Earth. And yet they too are gone, disappearing from the fossil record around 40,000 years ago, shortly after modern humans arrived in their territories. What happened to them is one of the great mysteries of human evolution. Did we kill them? Did we outcompete them for resources? Did we absorb them through interbreeding until they ceased to exist as a separate population? Or did they simply fail to adapt to changing conditions that we somehow managed to survive? We do not know for certain, and we may never know, but their disappearance haunts our understanding of what it means to be human. They were so like us, and yet they are gone, and we remain. There were the Denisovans, a species we know almost entirely from DNA rather than fossils. They were discovered not through bones but through genetics, their existence revealed by analysing ancient DNA extracted from a finger bone and a few teeth found in a cave in Siberia. From that tiny amount of material, scientists have reconstructed an entire species, one that lived across Asia, interbred with both Neanderthals and modern humans, and left genetic traces that persist in living people today. If you have ancestry from Southeast Asia, Australia, or the Pacific Islands, you likely carry Denisovan DNA in your cells, a genetic inheritance from a species we have never seen, whose faces we cannot reconstruct, whose lives we can barely imagine. The Denisovans are a reminder of how much we do not know about human evolution, how many species may have existed that left no fossils, how much of our story remains hidden in the deep past. There was Homo floresiensis, the Hobbit humans of Indonesia, a species so strange that when they were discovered in 2003, many scientists refused to believe they were real. Homo floresiensis stood only about 3.5 feet tall, with brains the size of a chimpanzee's, and yet they made stone tools and hunted small elephants on their island home. They survived until perhaps 50,000 years ago, meaning they coexisted with modern humans who had spread into Southeast Asia. Imagine encountering them, tiny humans, fully intelligent in their own way, living their lives on an island that time forgot. Where did they come from? How did they evolve to be so small? Why did their brains shrink while they maintained the ability to make tools? We do not know. They are one of the strangest mysteries in human evolution, a reminder that our family tree contains branches we never expected, species that challenge our assumptions about what humans can be. There was Homo naledi, discovered in a South African cave in 2013, a species that combines primitive features with surprisingly modern ones. Homo naledi had a brain only slightly larger than a chimpanzee's, and yet they apparently buried their dead deep in cave chambers, that are almost impossible to access, suggesting ritual behavior that we usually associate only with large-brained humans. How did a species with such a small brain develop the cultural complexity implied by deliberate burial? What does this tell us about the relationship between brain size and intelligence, between anatomy and behavior? Homo naledi challenges our assumptions, forces us to reconsider what we thought we knew, reminds us that human evolution is full of surprises. These are just a few of the human species that have existed. There are many others. Homo habilis, the first toolmakers, Homo heidelbergensis, possible ancestors of both Neanderthals and modern humans, Homo rudolfensis, known from a handful of fossils in East Africa, Paranthropus, the robust Australopithecines with massive jaws adapted for chewing tough plant foods. Each of these species has its own story, its own adaptations, its own way of being human, and each of them is gone, leaving only us, the last survivors of a once diverse family. This is the second thing they do not teach you, that we are not the culmination of a single line of progress, but the sole remaining branch of a once flourishing bush, alone in a world that once held many kinds of humans. The third thing they do not teach you is how often we nearly went extinct. The story of human evolution is usually told as a triumph, a march of progress from primitive beginnings to global dominance. But the reality is that we came close to disappearing many times, that our existence hung by a thread on multiple occasions, that we are here today only because of luck as much as skill. The most dramatic near-extinction event occurred around 70,000 years ago, when a supervolcano called Toba erupted in what is now Indonesia. The eruption was one of the largest in the last 2 million years, blasting thousands of cubic kilometers of rock and ash into the atmosphere, triggering a volcanic winter that may have lasted for years. Global temperatures plummeted, plants died, animals starved, and humans, who were already a small population confined to Africa, declined to perhaps as few as 10,000 individuals, maybe fewer. Some estimates suggest that the breeding population of humans dropped to just a few thousand, a tiny remnant from which all living humans descend. This is why humans today are so genetically similar to each other, far more similar than other great ape species. We passed through a bottleneck, a near-extinction event that pruned our genetic diversity and left us all descended from a handful of survivors. You're here tonight because a few thousand people, somewhere in Africa, managed to survive a global catastrophe that nearly erased our species from existence. Their struggle, their survival, their refusal to give up is written in your DNA. But Toba was not the only close call. Throughout human evolution, populations have risen and fallen, expanded and contracted, thrived and nearly disappeared. The fossil record shows gaps and discontinuities that suggest local extinctions, populations that flourished for thousands of years and then vanished without descendants. The genetic record shows evidence of multiple bottlenecks, multiple occasions when human populations crashed and then recovered. We like to think of ourselves as the dominant species on Earth, masters of our environment, secure in our position at the top of the food chain. But for most of our evolutionary history, we were a marginal species, a medium-sized ape struggling to survive in a world full of predators, competitors, and environmental challenges. Our current dominance is recent, just the last few thousand years out of millions, and it is not guaranteed to last. We are more fragile than we like to admit, more dependent on circumstances beyond our control, more vulnerable to extinction than our current success would suggest. This is the third thing they do not teach you, that we are survivors of multiple near-extinctions, lucky to be here, not destined to exist but contingent on countless accidents and narrow escapes. The fourth thing they do not teach you is how much of our evolution was driven by climate change. The simple version of human evolution presents it as a story of progress, of increasing intelligence and sophistication, as if evolution were moving toward a goal. But the real driver of human evolution was not progress but environment, not improvement, but adaptation to constantly changing conditions. Over the last 7 million years, Earth's climate has fluctuated dramatically, cycling between warm periods and ice ages, between wet periods and droughts, between stability and chaos. These fluctuations drove human evolution, forcing our ancestors to adapt or die, rewarding those who could cope with change and eliminating those who could not. The expansion of African grasslands driven by climate change pushed our ancestors out of the trees and onto the ground, selecting for upright walking and new ways of finding food. The ice ages of the last 2 million years drove cycles of expansion and contraction, pushing human populations into refugia during cold periods and allowing them to spread during warm periods. Climate change made us who we are, shaped our bodies and our minds, drove the evolution of our large brains and our remarkable flexibility. We're creatures of climate change, adapted to a world that never stays the same, equipped with the intelligence and adaptability to cope with constantly shifting conditions. This is both our heritage and our challenge, as we face a future of climate change that we ourselves have triggered. The fifth thing they do not teach you is that we interbred with other human species. This is one of the most remarkable discoveries in human evolution, made possible only in the last 2 decades by the sequencing of ancient DNA. When modern humans spread out of Africa and encountered other human species, we did not simply replace them. We had children with them. We mixed our genes with theirs, creating hybrid populations that carried DNA from multiple human species. If you have ancestry from outside Africa, you carry Neanderthal DNA in your cells, typically between 1 and 4% of your genome. If you have ancestry from certain parts of Asia and the Pacific, you carry Denisovan DNA as well. And there are hints of other interbreeding events, with species we have not yet identified, ghost populations that left their genetic traces in living humans but have not been matched to any known fossils. This interbreeding was not a minor footnote to human evolution. It had real consequences. Some of the genes we inherited from Neanderthals and Denisovans have been shown to affect our immune systems, our skin and hair, our adaptation to high altitudes, our susceptibility to certain diseases. We are not purebred modern humans, but hybrids, carrying the genetic legacy of multiple human species that came together and merged over thousands of years. This is the fifth thing they do not teach you, that the boundaries between human species were not firm walls but permeable membranes, that our ancestry is more complex and more interesting than a single clean lineage. The sixth thing they do not teach you is how recently we evolved many of our distinctive traits. The simple version of human evolution presents our key features as ancient, as if we have been essentially the same for hundreds of thousands of years. But many of the traits that make us distinctively human evolved quite recently, in the last 100,000 years or even more recently. The capacity for complex language, for example, may be only about 100,000 years old, based on changes in the genes associated with speech and the anatomy of the vocal tract. The full flowering of human creativity, the explosion of art and symbolism and complex technology, appears in the archaeological record only about 50,000 years ago, suggesting that something changed in human cognition around that time. Even our current anatomy is relatively recent. The gracile, lightly built skeletons of modern humans, so different from the robust bones of earlier species, evolved only in the last 100,000 years or so. We think of ourselves as an ancient species, but in evolutionary terms we're quite new, still adapting, still changing, still evolving. This is the sixth thing they do not teach you, that human evolution did not stop long ago but continues to this day, that we are not a finished product, but a work in progress. The seventh thing they do not teach you is how much of your body is evolutionary compromise. The human body is often presented as a marvel of design, a perfectly adapted machine for thinking and moving and surviving. But the reality is that our bodies are full of compromises, trade-offs, and outright flaws, the legacy of an evolutionary history that optimized for survival and reproduction rather than perfection. Consider your back, that aching, problematic structure that causes so much suffering. The human spine evolved from a horizontal structure designed to support a four-legged animal, and it has never fully adapted to the demands of upright walking. The curves of the spine, the vulnerability of the lower back, the prevalence of back pain in human populations, all of these are the result of evolutionary compromise, of adapting an old structure to a new purpose without the luxury of starting from scratch. Consider your knees, those complex joints that wear out so often, that are so vulnerable to injury, that cause so much trouble as we age. The human knee evolved from the knee of a climbing ape and has been modified for walking and running on 2 legs. But the modification is imperfect, leaving us with joints that are prone to damage and deterioration. Consider your eyes, those remarkable organs of vision that are nonetheless wired backwards, with the light-sensitive cells facing away from the incoming light, requiring a blind spot where the optic nerve passes through the retina. No engineer would design an eye this way, but evolution does not design from scratch. It modifies what already exists, making incremental improvements that are constrained by history. Consider your throat, where the pathways for breathing and swallowing cross, creating the risk of choking that kills thousands of people every year. This is a legacy of our fish ancestors, whose breathing and eating apparatus was arranged in a way that made sense for them but creates problems for us. Evolution could not rewire the system from scratch, so we live with the compromise, with the risk, with the flaw. These are just a few examples of the many compromises and imperfections in the human body. They do not mean that evolution is false or that our bodies are poorly made. They mean that evolution works by modification rather than design, by incremental change rather than starting fresh, by optimizing for survival and reproduction rather than perfection. Understanding these compromises helps us understand our bodies better, helps us understand why we suffer certain problems, helps us appreciate what evolution can and cannot do. The 8th thing they do not teach you is how much your psychology is shaped by evolution. Your fears, your desires, your social instincts, your ways of thinking about the world, all of these are products of evolutionary history, adapted for a world very different from the one you live in today. Consider your fear of snakes and spiders, those small creatures that trigger such intense reactions in so many people. This fear is not learned, it is innate, present in human infants and found across cultures, a product of millions of years of evolution, during which snakes and spiders were genuine threats to our ancestors. Consider your preference for sweet and fatty foods, those calorie-dense nutrients that were rare and valuable for most of human evolution, but are now abundant and contributing to epidemics of obesity and diabetes. Your body evolved to crave these foods because they were hard to find, and it has not had time to adapt to a world where they are available on every corner. Consider your tendency to form coalitions and identify with groups, that tribal instinct that has served humans well for millions of years, but now contributes to conflict and prejudice in a world where we encounter far more different kinds of people than our ancestors ever did. Consider your status anxiety, your concern with what others think of you, your sensitivity to social hierarchies. These are adaptations for life in small groups where reputation mattered, where being excluded from the group could mean death, where your place in the social order determined your access to resources and mates. You live in a very different world now, but your psychology still carries these ancient adaptations, still responds to social threats as if they were matters of life and death. Understanding the evolutionary origins of your psychology does not mean you are trapped by it. Humans have a remarkable capacity to override instincts, to create cultures that channel or suppress evolutionary tendencies, to use our large brains to make choices that our ancestors could not have made. But understanding these origins helps explain why certain things are so hard, why certain patterns keep repeating, why we struggle with problems that seem like they should be easy to solve. The 9th thing they do not teach you is that evolution did not make us special on purpose. The story of human evolution is often told with a sense of inevitability, as if evolution were working toward the goal of producing us, as if we were the point of the whole process. But evolution has no goals, no intentions, no plan. It is simply the result of differential reproduction, of some individuals leaving more offspring than others, of traits that help survival and reproduction becoming more common over time. We are special not because evolution intended us to be special, but because a particular combination of circumstances in a particular lineage led to the evolution of traits that happen to be remarkable. Large brains, language, culture, technology. In a different world with different circumstances, these traits might never have evolved, or they might have evolved in a different lineage, producing intelligent beings utterly unlike us. We are not the culmination of evolution, not its purpose, not its destiny. We are one outcome among countless possible outcomes, one twig on one branch of an unimaginably vast tree of life. This does not make us less remarkable. If anything, it makes us more remarkable, because it means our existence is not guaranteed, not inevitable, not written into the fabric of the universe. We are here by accident as much as by adaptation, by luck as much as by fitness, by circumstances that could easily have been otherwise. This is the 9th thing they do not teach you, that our existence is contingent, that we are not the point of evolution but one of its many products, that our specialness is real but not destined. The 10th thing they do not teach you is how much we still do not know. The story of human evolution is often presented with confidence, as if scientists have figured out all the major questions and are just filling in details. But the reality is that huge gaps remain in our understanding, that major mysteries remain unsolved, that new discoveries regularly overturn what we thought we knew. We do not know exactly when or how language evolved, one of the most important transitions in human history. We do not know why human brains tripled in size over the last 2 million years, what drove this remarkable and energetically expensive change. We do not know why Homo sapiens survived when all other human species went extinct, what made us different, what gave us the edge. We do not know how many human species there were, how they were related to each other, which ones interbred with which others. We do not know what happened during many periods of human evolution, gaps in the fossil record where we have no evidence of what our ancestors were doing or how they were changing. Every year, new fossils are discovered that challenge existing theories, that reveal species we did not know existed, that force scientists to redraw the family tree yet again. The story of human evolution is not finished. It is an ongoing investigation, a work in progress, a mystery that we are still solving. This humility is important. It reminds us that science is a process, not a collection of fixed truths, that knowledge grows and changes, that we should hold our theories lightly and be ready to revise them when new evidence appears. Now let me take you deeper into the story, into the details they glossed over, into the mysteries they did not want to complicate your education with. Let me tell you about the things your body does that make no sense until you understand their evolutionary origins. Let me tell you about hiccups, those annoying spasms that serve no apparent purpose in humans. Hiccups are a legacy of our fish ancestors, who used a similar movement to pump water over their gills. The neural circuits that control hiccups are ancient, older than air breathing, older than land dwelling, a relic of a time when our ancestors lived in water and breathed through gills. You hiccup because evolution cannot delete old circuits that are no longer useful. It can only modify them, repurpose them, build on top of them. The hiccup circuit remains, occasionally activated by accident, producing a behavior that meant something to a fish but means nothing to you except annoyance. Let me tell you about goosebumps, those tiny bumps that appear on your skin when you're cold or frightened. Goosebumps are the remnants of a response that made sense when our ancestors had fur. When a furry animal is cold, the muscles at the base of each hair contract, causing the fur to stand up and trap more air, providing better insulation. When a furry animal is frightened, the same response makes the fur stand on end, making the animal look larger and more intimidating to predators or rivals. You do not have enough hair for goosebumps to provide insulation or make you look larger. But the response remains, triggered by cold or fear, a vestige of your furry ancestry that no longer serves any purpose except to remind you of where you came from. Let me tell you about your appendix, that small pouch attached to your large intestine that seems to serve no purpose except to occasionally become infected and require surgical removal. The appendix is a vestige of a larger cecum that our ancestors used to digest plant materials like cellulose. As human diets changed and we became more dependent on cooked food, the cecum shrank, leaving only the appendix as a reminder of what once was. Recent research suggests the appendix may have been repurposed to serve as a reservoir for beneficial gut bacteria, but it remains a shadow of its former self, a vestige of a digestive system adapted for a different diet than the one we eat today. Let me tell you about your tailbone, that small fused collection of vertebrae at the base of your spine. You do not have a tail, but you have the remnants of one, the bones that would support a tail in your tailed ancestors. During early embryonic development, human embryos actually have visible tails, which are usually absorbed before birth. Occasionally, babies are born with vestigial tails, soft protrusions containing no bones but demonstrating that the genetic program for tail development still exists in our genomes, still occasionally activating, still reminding us of our tailed ancestry. Your tailbone is a fossil inside your body, evidence of evolutionary history written into your very skeleton. Let me tell you about the muscles in your ear, small muscles that most people cannot consciously control, but that remain connected to neural circuits and can sometimes be activated. These muscles once moved the ears of our ancestors, allowing them to swivel their ears towards sounds like a cat or a dog. Most humans cannot move their ears, but the muscles remain vestigial remnants of the ability we lost when our ancestors developed other ways of locating sounds. Some people can wiggle their ears, activating these ancient muscles through conscious effort or genetic variation, demonstrating that the hardware for ear movement still exists, even though most of us cannot use it. Let me tell you about the pay 'em grasp reflex, the automatic grasping response of newborn babies that causes them to grip anything placed in their palms with surprising strength. This reflex is a vestige of our primate ancestry, when babies needed to cling to their mother's fur as the mothers moved through the trees. Human babies do not need to cling to fur, but the reflex remains, strong enough in some newborns to support their entire body weight, a reminder of a time when letting go meant falling to your death. The reflex fades in the first months of life as more sophisticated motor control develops, but its presence in newborns is a window into our evolutionary past, a behavior that made sense millions of years ago and still appears briefly in every human life. These vestiges are not mistakes or flaws. They are evidence written in your body of the long evolutionary journey that produced you. They are reminders that you are not designed from scratch, but descended from ancestors with different bodies and different needs, that you carry their legacy in every cell and every structure, that you are continuous with the past even as you live in the present. Now let me tell you about the evolution of the human brain, that remarkable organ that makes you who you are, that allows you to understand these words and contemplate your own existence. The human brain is often cited as the most complex object in the known universe, and its evolution is one of the most dramatic stories in the history of life. Over the last 7 million years, the brains of our ancestors tripled in size, an increase unprecedented in the history of mammals, an expansion that required enormous changes in diet, social organization, and development. But the story of brain evolution is not simply a story of getting bigger. It is a story of reorganization, of new structures built on top of old ones, of ancient circuits repurposed for new functions, of an organ that is less like a designed computer and more like a coral reef, layers upon layers accumulated over millions of years. The human brain contains structures that evolved at very different times, serving very different purposes and not always working together harmoniously. The brainstem, at the base of the brain, controls basic life functions like breathing and heart rate, functions so essential that they must operate without conscious thought or attention. The brainstem is ancient, similar in structure to the brains of reptiles, a legacy of our distant ancestors who needed to regulate their bodies long before anything like thought or emotion existed. On top of the brainstem sits the limbic system, a collection of structures involved in emotion, memory, and motivation. The limbic system is newer than the brainstem but still old, shared with other mammals, a legacy of ancestors who needed to feel fear and pleasure, who needed to form memories and make decisions about what to pursue and what to avoid. And on top of the limbic system sits the cortex, that wrinkled outer layer that gives the human brain its distinctive appearance, the seat of language and reasoning and planning and self-awareness. The cortex is the newest part of the brain, vastly expanded in humans compared to other animals, the structure that makes possible everything we consider distinctively human. This layered structure of the brain explains many peculiarities of human psychology. It explains why emotion and reason often conflict, why we can know something intellectually but feel something different emotionally, why we can make plans that our impulses undermine. The different layers of the brain were not designed to work together. They evolved at different times for different purposes, and they do not always agree. The limbic system can trigger fear or desire before the cortex has a chance to evaluate whether the fear or desire is justified. The cortex can make logical arguments that the limbic system ignores. The brainstem can override everything when basic survival is at stake, shutting down higher functions to focus on immediate threats. This is not a flaw in the human brain, but a consequence of its evolutionary history, of the fact that it was not designed but accumulated, layer upon layer, over hundreds of millions of years. The expansion of the human cortex is one of the great mysteries of evolution. Brains are expensive organs, consuming about 20% of the body's energy, while representing only about 2% of its weight. Evolving a larger brain requires either consuming more calories or diverting energy from other functions, and it requires changes in development that allow the brain to grow larger without killing the mother during childbirth. The fact that human brains tripled in size despite these costs suggests that the benefits were enormous, that larger brains provided such advantages in survival and reproduction that they were worth the expense. But what exactly were those benefits? What did larger brains allow our ancestors to do that smaller brains could not? Scientists have proposed many theories. Some emphasize the cognitive demands of finding food in variable environments. suggesting that larger brains allowed our ancestors to remember the locations of resources, to plan ahead, to develop tools and techniques for extracting food from difficult sources. Some emphasize the social demands of living in groups, suggesting that larger brains allowed our ancestors to track complex social relationships, to cooperate and compete effectively, to navigate the politics of group living. Some emphasize the feedback between brains and culture, suggesting that once our ancestors began developing tools and language, these cultural innovations created new selection pressures for brains that could use them more effectively, leading to a runaway process of brain expansion. Probably all of these factors played a role, interacting in complex ways that we are still trying to understand. The expansion of the human brain was not a simple response to a single challenge, but a complex process involving many factors, many trade-offs, many accidents of circumstance. The costs of our large brains are written in our bodies and our lives. Human infants are born helpless, more helpless than the infants of any other primate, because they must be born before their heads grow too large to pass through the birth canal. This early birth means that human development continues outside the womb for far longer than in other species, creating the extended childhood that is characteristic of our species, the years of dependency during which children learn the skills and knowledge they need to survive. The human pelvis is shaped by the competing demands of upright walking and giving birth to large-brained infants, a compromise that makes childbirth more difficult and dangerous for humans than for other apes. The human diet must include sufficient calories and nutrients to support the hungry brain, creating dependencies on high-quality foods like meat and cooked vegetables that shaped our ancestors' way of life. Everything about human existence is shaped by our large brains, by the benefits they provide and the costs they impose, by the evolutionary pressures that drove their expansion and the constraints that limited how they could expand. Now let me tell you about the evolution of human language, that remarkable ability that allows me to put thoughts into words and transmit them across space and time into your mind. Language is often cited as the key human adaptation, the ability that makes possible all our other achievements, the foundation of culture and technology and civilization. But the evolution of language is one of the great mysteries of human evolution, because language leaves almost no direct traces in the fossil record. We cannot find fossilized words or preserved conversations. We can only infer the evolution of language from indirect evidence, the anatomy of the vocal tract, the structure of the brain, the archaeological remains of behavior that might indicate linguistic ability. What we know is that human language is qualitatively different from the communication systems of other animals. Other animals communicate, of course. Birds sing, whales call, bees dance, chimpanzees gesture and vocalize. But none of these systems has the key properties of human language: the ability to combine a finite number of elements into an infinite number of meanings, the ability to refer to things that are not present, the ability to talk about the past and the future, and the hypothetical, the ability to transmit complex information from mind to mind with precision and flexibility. Human language is not just more sophisticated than animal communication. It is different in kind, a new type of system that appears to have evolved only once in our lineage. When did language evolve? This is one of the most debated questions in human evolution. Some scientists believe that language is ancient, that it began to evolve millions of years ago and developed gradually over a vast span of time. They point to the fact that language requires many different adaptations, from the vocal tract to the brain to the social structures that support communication, and argue that these could not have evolved all at once. Other scientists believe that language is relatively recent, that it appeared suddenly in the last 100,000 years as a result of some key genetic or neurological change. They point to the archaeological evidence, which shows an explosion of symbolic behavior and complex technology around 50,000 years ago, and argue that this explosion was triggered by the emergence of fully modern language. The truth is that we do not know. Language may have evolved gradually over millions of years, or it may have appeared relatively suddenly in recent times. The evidence is ambiguous, and the debate continues. What we do know is that language changed everything. Once our ancestors could share complex information through language, they could accumulate knowledge across generations, building on what previous generations had learned rather than starting from scratch each time. They could coordinate complex activities, planning hunts and gathering efforts that required many individuals working together towards shared goals. They could transmit culture, the beliefs and practices and technologies that define human groups and distinguish them from each other. They could think in new ways, using language not just to communicate but to structure their own thoughts, to reason and plan and imagine possibilities that did not yet exist. Language is not just a tool for communication, it is a tool for thought, a technology that expanded the capabilities of the human mind and made possible achievements that would otherwise be inconceivable. Now let me tell you about the evolution of human diet and cooking, because what we eat and how we prepare it has shaped our bodies and our brains in ways that are often overlooked. The simple version of human evolution focuses on hunting, on our ancestors as mighty predators pursuing large game across the African savanna. But the reality is more complex. Our ancestors were omnivores, eating a wide variety of foods depending on what was available. Meat when they could get it, but also plants, fruits, nuts, insects, shellfish, and anything else that provided calories and nutrients. This dietary flexibility was one of our greatest adaptations, allowing our ancestors to survive in environments ranging from tropical forests to Arctic tundra, to cope with seasonal variations in food availability, to colonize new territories where familiar foods were absent. But the most important dietary change in human evolution was not what we ate, but how we prepared it. The control of fire and the invention of cooking may have been the most significant technological advances in human history, more important than any tool or weapon, more transformative than any other innovation until the agricultural revolution. Cooking does many things. It makes food safer, killing parasites and pathogens that could otherwise cause disease. It makes food more digestible, breaking down tough fibers and complex molecules that our bodies would otherwise struggle to extract nutrients from. And most importantly, it makes food more calorie-dense, allowing our ancestors to extract more energy from the same amount of raw material. This increased caloric efficiency may have been the key that unlocked brain expansion. Brains are energetically expensive, and the larger brains of our ancestors required more calories than smaller brains. Cooking provided those calories, allowing our ancestors to support larger brains without spending all their time eating. Some scientists believe that cooking was not just helpful for brain expansion, but necessary, that our ancestors could not have evolved such large brains without the caloric boost that cooking provided. The effects of cooking are written in our bodies. Our teeth are smaller than those of other apes because we do not need to chew as much. Our jaws are weaker because we do not need to process tough raw foods. Our digestive systems are smaller because cooked food requires less digestive processing. We are adapted to cooked food, dependent on it, unable to thrive on a purely raw diet the way our distant ancestors could. This dependency is so complete that some scientists argue we should consider ourselves a different kind of animal than our pre-cooking ancestors, a species that has co-evolved with its technology in ways that have altered our basic biology. Now let me tell you about the evolution of human cooperation and social life, because we are a profoundly social species, more dependent on each other than almost any other animal, and this sociality is the product of millions of years of evolution. Humans live in groups, rely on groups, suffer when isolated from groups. This is not cultural but biological, written into our brains and our hormones and our psychology. We evolved in social groups, and our minds are adapted for social life, equipped with sophisticated abilities to understand others, to cooperate with others, to compete with others, to form alliances and detect cheaters and navigate the complex politics of group living. The evolution of human sociality was driven by many factors. Living in groups provides protection from predators, more eyes to watch for danger, more bodies to defend against attack. Living in groups allows for cooperative hunting and gathering, pooling effort to obtain food that would be impossible for individuals working alone. Living in groups allows for the sharing of information, knowledge about where to find food and water, about dangers and opportunities, about the skills and techniques that make survival possible. But living in groups also creates challenges. Resources must be shared, which creates conflicts over distribution. Status must be negotiated, which creates conflicts over hierarchy. Mates must be competed for, which creates conflicts over reproduction. The evolution of human sociality involved the evolution of mechanisms for managing these conflicts, for maintaining cooperation despite the temptations to cheat, for building trust despite the risks of betrayal. One of the key mechanisms for maintaining human cooperation is reputation. In small groups where everyone knows everyone else, reputation matters enormously. A person known to be reliable and generous will be sought out as a partner, will have allies in times of need, will be treated well by others. A person known to be selfish and untrustworthy will be avoided, will find themselves without allies, will be punished for their transgressions. The psychology of reputation, the intense concern with what others think of us, the shame we feel when we violate social norms, the pride we feel when we are respected, all of these are adaptations for social life, mechanisms that evolved to help our ancestors navigate the complex social world of human groups. Another key mechanism is reciprocity, the tendency to help those who have helped us and to punish those who have harmed us. Reciprocity creates incentives for cooperation because individuals who cooperate can expect cooperation in return, while individuals who defect can expect punishment and exclusion. The psychology of reciprocity, the gratitude we feel when others help us, the anger we feel when we are cheated, the desire to punish those who violate norms of fairness, all of these are adaptations that support cooperation by making it advantageous. Yet another mechanism is kin selection, the tendency to help relatives who share our genes. From an evolutionary perspective, helping a relative is a way of helping copies of your own genes survive and reproduce, even if it comes at some cost to yourself. The psychology of kin selection, the special concern we feel for family members, the sacrifices we're willing to make for relatives, the grief we feel when family members die, all of these are products of evolution, adaptations that increase the survival of genes shared with relatives. These mechanisms work together to create the complex social world that humans inhabit, a world of families and friendships, of alliances and rivalries, of trust and betrayal, of cooperation and conflict. Understanding these mechanisms helps explain many puzzles of human behavior, helps explain why we feel and act the ways we do, helps explain the strange mixture of selfishness and altruism that characterizes human social life. Now let me tell you about the evolution of human emotions, those powerful feelings that color our experience and drive our behavior, that make us feel alive and connected to the world, that can bring us to the heights of joy and the depths of despair. Emotions are not arbitrary. They are adaptations, evolved responses to situations that were important for survival and reproduction, mechanisms that motivated our ancestors to act in ways that increased their fitness. Understanding emotions in evolutionary terms helps explain why we feel them, what they are for, why they sometimes seem inappropriate or excessive in modern contexts. Fear is an emotion that evolved to protect us from danger. When our ancestors encountered threats, whether predators or hostile humans or environmental hazards, they needed to respond quickly and appropriately. Fear provided that response, triggering physiological changes that prepared the body for action, focusing attention on the threat, motivating avoidance or defense. The fears that are easiest to learn, the fears that appear most commonly across cultures, are fears of things that threatened our ancestors: snakes and spiders, heights and deep water, darkness and strangers. These fears made sense in the environments where humans evolved, and they remain with us today, even when the threats they evolved to address are no longer present. Anger is an emotion that evolved to respond to violations and offences. When our ancestors were cheated or attacked or disrespected, they needed to respond in ways that deterred future violations, that restored their status, that signaled to others that they could not be exploited with impunity. Anger provided that response, motivating aggression against offenders, signaling readiness to retaliate, warning others not to cross boundaries. Anger can be destructive, can lead to violence and conflict, but it evolved because it served important functions, because our ancestors who could not feel anger were exploited and displaced by those who could. Love is an emotion that evolved to maintain relationships that were crucial for survival and reproduction. Romantic love motivates pair bonding, keeping partners together long enough to raise children who need years of care before they can survive on their own. Parental love motivates investment in offspring, the enormous expenditure of time and energy required to raise human children. Friendship love motivates loyalty to allies, the reciprocal relationships that provide support in times of need. These different types of love serve different evolutionary functions, but they share common features: intense positive feelings when with the loved one, distress when separated, motivation to maintain and protect the relationship. Grief is an emotion that evolved in response to the loss of important relationships. When our ancestors lost a partner or a child or an ally, they lost someone who had been contributing to their survival and reproduction, someone whose absence created real costs. Grief motivates searching for the lost person, reluctance to accept their absence, eventually adjustment to a world without them. Grief is painful, perhaps the most painful emotion we can experience, but it evolved because the relationships it responds to were important, because our ancestors who did not grieve did not form the deep attachments that human survival requires. Disgust is an emotion that evolved to protect us from contamination and disease. Things that trigger disgust, such as rotting food, feces, blood, and deformed bodies, are things that could transmit pathogens that our ancestors needed to avoid to stay healthy. Disgust motivates avoidance, triggers nausea and revulsion, creates strong memories that prevent repeated exposure. The expansion of disgust to moral violations, the feeling that certain behaviors are not just wrong but disgusting, may be a cultural elaboration of this basic evolved mechanism, using the powerful motivational force of disgust to enforce social norms. These are just a few examples of how evolutionary thinking illuminates human emotions. Every emotion has an evolutionary story, a function it evolved to serve, a reason it feels the way it does. Understanding these stories does not diminish our emotions or make them less real. It helps us understand ourselves better, helps us see why we feel what we feel, helps us navigate the emotional landscape of human existence with greater insight and compassion. Now let me tell you about something they definitely do not teach you in school, the evidence that our ancestors practiced cannibalism. This is not a comfortable topic, not something that fits the narrative of human progress and moral improvement. But the evidence is clear that cannibalism was practiced by multiple human species at multiple times and places, that eating the dead, whether enemies or even relatives, was part of human behavior for much of our evolutionary history. The evidence comes from bones, human bones with cut marks and fractures consistent with butchering, human bones that were processed the same way animal bones were processed for food. Sites in Europe, Africa, and elsewhere have yielded human remains that show clear evidence of cannibalism, from Neanderthals who consumed their dead to early modern humans who did the same. The reasons for cannibalism probably varied. Some was probably nutritional, consuming the dead as food in times of scarcity. Some was probably ritual, consuming the dead as part of funerary practices, perhaps believing that eating the dead transferred their qualities to the living. Some was probably violent, consuming enemies as an expression of dominance or revenge. Cannibalism is disturbing to modern sensibilities, and it should be. We have developed moral intuitions against consuming our own kind, intuitions that are probably adaptive, that help maintain social cohesion and prevent the spread of disease. But the presence of cannibalism in our evolutionary past reminds us that human nature is not fixed, that behaviors we consider unthinkable were once practiced, that morality evolves along with everything else. Our ancestors were not saints. They were survivors, doing whatever it took to persist in a difficult world, engaging in behaviors that we would consider horrific but that made sense in their contexts. Understanding this helps us understand the full range of human potential, both the darkness and the light. Now let me tell you about the evolution of human diversity, the differences between human populations that are so visible and yet so often misunderstood. Humans come in many varieties, different skin colors, different facial features, different body proportions, different hair textures. These differences are real, visible, and they have been used throughout history to divide people, to create hierarchies, to justify oppression. But the evolutionary story of human diversity is very different from the racist narratives that have been built upon it. Understanding how human diversity evolved helps us see that our differences are superficial, recent, and far less significant than our similarities. Human diversity is the result of adaptation to different environments. When human populations spread across the world, they encountered different climates, different challenges, different selection pressures. Natural selection favored traits that improved survival and reproduction in each environment, leading to the divergence we see today. Skin color is the clearest example. In tropical regions with intense sunlight, dark skin protects against ultraviolet radiation, preventing skin cancer and the breakdown of folate, a nutrient essential for fetal development. In high latitudes with weaker sunlight, lighter skin allows more ultraviolet radiation to penetrate, enabling the production of vitamin D, which is essential for bone health. Skin color is an adaptation to latitude, a product of natural selection acting on populations in different environments, not a marker of fundamental difference or worth. Other aspects of human diversity have similar explanations. Body proportions vary with climate. Populations from cold regions tend to have stockier bodies that conserve heat, while populations from hot regions tend to have longer limbs that dissipate heat. Nose shape varies with humidity. Populations from dry regions tend to have narrower nasal passages that warm and humidify inhaled air. Hair texture varies for reasons that are less clear, possibly related to heat regulation or sexual selection. All of these differences are adaptations, products of natural selection operating on populations in different environments over thousands of generations. But here is what they often do not tell you. Human genetic diversity is remarkably low, far lower than in most other species. Despite our visible differences, humans are more genetically similar to each other than chimpanzees are to each other, or gorillas, or most other mammals. This low diversity is a legacy of our recent origin and our population bottlenecks, the narrow escapes that reduced our numbers and pruned our genetic variation. The visible differences between human populations are real, but they are superficial, involving a tiny fraction of our genomes, mostly related to traits that are strongly affected by natural selection like skin color. At a genetic level, all humans are remarkably similar, a single species with minor variations, far more united by our common heritage than divided by our surface differences. This is what they do not teach you about human diversity, that it is both real and superficial, both meaningful and trivial, the product of recent evolution acting on a species that is fundamentally unified. Understanding this helps us navigate the complex politics of human difference, helps us appreciate diversity without exaggerating its significance, helps us see that we are all one family, recently diverged and still closely related. Now let me tell you about the future of human evolution, because evolution did not stop when modern humans appeared, because we are still evolving, because the future of our species is being shaped right now by processes we barely understand. The common belief that human evolution has stopped, that culture and technology have insulated us from natural selection, is wrong. Selection continues to operate on human populations, favoring some traits over others, changing the frequencies of genes, altering the trajectory of our species. Some examples of recent human evolution are well documented. Lactose tolerance, the ability to digest milk into adulthood, evolved independently in several populations that domesticated cattle, spreading rapidly because of the nutritional advantages it provided. Resistance to certain diseases like malaria has increased in populations where these diseases are common, as individuals with resistance genes survived and reproduced more successfully. Adaptations to high altitude have evolved in populations living in places like Tibet and the Andes, allowing them to thrive in conditions that sicken people from lower elevations. These are examples of classic natural selection, differential survival, and reproduction based on genetic variation. But human evolution is now operating in new ways, ways that did not exist for most of our history. Cultural evolution, the change in beliefs and practices and technologies over time, is now far faster than genetic evolution, allowing us to adapt to new circumstances without waiting for genes to change. Medical technology keeps alive individuals who would have died in previous generations, altering the selection pressures that once shaped our species. Mate choice is no longer constrained by geography or social position to the extent it once was, potentially increasing genetic mixing between populations. These new conditions are reshaping human evolution in ways we cannot fully predict. What will humans look like in 1,000 years, in 10,000 years, in 1,000,000 years? We cannot know. Evolution depends on circumstances that are impossible to foresee: future environments, future diseases, future social conditions. If we spread to other planets, as some hope, different populations may diverge under different selection pressures, potentially even becoming separate species over vast spans of time. If we remain on Earth, changing conditions may favour different traits than those that served our ancestors, shaping a humanity different from the one we know today. If we develop technologies to directly modify our genes, we may take control of our own evolution, directing it consciously rather than leaving it to the blind processes of natural selection. The future of human evolution is unwritten, open, dependent on choices we have not yet made and circumstances we cannot foresee. But understanding our evolutionary past helps us think about our evolutionary future, helps us see ourselves as part of an ongoing process rather than a finished product, helps us appreciate both how far we have come and how far we might yet go. Now, Let me tell you about some of the strangest facts of human evolution. Facts that are true but sound too strange to be real. Facts that they do not teach you because they do not fit into simple narratives. Did you know that every person alive today shares a common ancestor who lived just 3,000 years ago? This is the genealogical common ancestor, the most recent individual from whom all living humans descend. 3,000 years sounds recent, and it is. But the mathematics of ancestry make it inevitable. Each of us has 2 parents, 4 grandparents, 8 great-grandparents, and so on, doubling each generation. Go back 30 generations, about 1,000 years, and you theoretically have more than 1 billion ancestors, far more than the number of people who were alive at that time. This means that many of our ancestral lines must converge, that we must share many ancestors in common, that the family tree of humanity is not a tree at all, but a tangled web where everyone connects to everyone else within a surprisingly short time span. Did you know that all blue-eyed people share a single common ancestor? Blue eyes are caused by a specific mutation that reduces the production of melanin in the iris. This mutation appears to have occurred once, in a single individual living somewhere near the Black Sea about 6,000 to 10,000 years ago. All blue-eyed people today are descended from this one person, carrying the same mutation that arose in their eyes long ago. Blue eyes spread through Europe and neighbouring regions, probably because they were favoured by sexual selection, because people found them attractive and chose blue-eyed mates. Every blue-eyed person you meet is your relative, descended from the same ancestor through an unbroken chain of blue-eyed forebears. Did you know that humans and bananas share about 60% of their DNA? This sounds absurd, but it reflects the deep unity of all life on Earth. Humans and bananas share a common ancestor, a single-celled organism that lived over 1 billion years ago. Many of the genes that were present in that ancestor, genes for basic cellular functions like metabolism and cell division, have been retained in both lineages, changed but still recognizable, still performing similar functions. We are more closely related to bananas than we might like to admit, cousins in the vast family of life, sharing genetic heritage that stretches back to the earliest days of life on Earth. Did you know that you're more closely related to a fish than a fish is to a shark? This sounds paradoxical, but it reflects the branching pattern of evolution. Fish is not a coherent evolutionary group, but a collection of lineages that diverged at different times. Bony fish, the group that includes salmon and goldfish, are more closely related to land vertebrates like us than they are to sharks, which diverged from the lineage leading to bony fish hundreds of millions of years ago. When you look at a goldfish, you're looking at a closer relative than you might think, a cousin rather than a distant stranger, connected to you by a chain of ancestry that is shorter than the chain connecting that goldfish to a shark. Did you know that human pregnancies are limited by brain size, not by developmental readiness? Human babies are born earlier in development than they should be, more helpless than the babies of other apes, because their heads must pass through the birth canal before they grow too large. If human babies stayed in the womb until they were as developmentally advanced as newborn chimpanzees, their heads would be too big to be born. Instead, they are born early, and human development continues outside the womb for the first year of life, a period sometimes called exterogestation. The human birth canal and the human infant head are locked in an evolutionary arms race, the head getting as large as possible while the pelvis struggles to accommodate it, neither side able to gain a permanent advantage. Did you know that the human eye has a blind spot that you never notice? The optic nerve exits the retina at a point where there are no light-sensitive cells, creating a gap in your visual field. You do not notice this gap because your brain fills it in, constructing a seamless visual experience from incomplete data. This blind spot exists because of the way the vertebrate eye evolved, with the neural wiring in front of the photoreceptors rather than behind them, a design that no engineer would choose but that evolution produced because it built on what already existed rather than starting from scratch. These strange facts are part of the full story of human evolution, a story far more complex and surprising and wonderful than the simple version they teach in schools. Evolution produces outcomes that seem designed but are not, structures that seem optimal but are compromised, patterns that seem logical but reflect historical accidents. Understanding evolution means understanding these quirks and oddities, seeing them not as flaws but as evidence of the process that produced them, appreciating the strange beauty of a world shaped by descent with modification. Now let me tell you about the mysteries that remain, The questions that scientists are still trying to answer, the gaps in our understanding that future research may fill or may remain forever uncertain. Why did human brains triple in size? We have theories, as I mentioned earlier, but we do not have definitive answers. The brain expansion was rapid in evolutionary terms, dramatic in its extent, and crucial for everything that makes us human. Yet we cannot point to a single cause and say this is why it happened. Brain evolution remains one of the great puzzles of human origins, a question that touches on everything from diet to social life to language to tools. Why did art and symbolism appear so suddenly in the archaeological record? Around 50,000 years ago, there was an apparent explosion of creative behaviour. Cave paintings, carved figurines, decorated tools, burial goods. This creative explosion suggests a cognitive change, a new capacity for symbolic thought that was either absent or unexpressed in earlier humans. But what triggered this change? Was it a genetic mutation, a cultural innovation, an environmental pressure? We do not know. The creative explosion is one of the most dramatic transitions in human history, and we cannot explain it with confidence. What happened to all the other human species? For most of the last 2 million years, multiple human species coexisted on Earth. Then, starting around 50,000 years ago, they began to disappear, one after another, until only we remained. Did we kill them? Did we outcompete them? Did we absorb them through interbreeding? Did they simply fail to adapt to changing conditions? Different species may have met different fates, and we may never know the full story. Our solitude as the last human species is one of the great mysteries of our existence. How did language evolve? I discussed this earlier, but it bears repeating how much we do not know. Language is perhaps the most important human adaptation, the key to everything else we have achieved. Yet we cannot trace its evolution directly, cannot identify its origin with confidence, cannot explain how the capacity for infinite linguistic creativity emerged from the finite communication systems of other animals. What is consciousness, and how did it evolve? This is the deepest mystery of all, the hard problem that philosophers and scientists struggle to address. We are aware, we experience, we have an inner life that feels like something from the inside. How does this subjective experience arise from objective brain processes? When did consciousness emerge in our lineage? Do other animals have it? We do not know, and we may never know, because consciousness is inherently private, accessible only from the inside, resistant to the objective methods of science. These mysteries remind us that human evolution is not a closed book, but an ongoing investigation. A story we are still piecing together from fragmentary evidence. A narrative full of gaps and uncertainties. This incompleteness is not a weakness of science, but its strength, an honest acknowledgement of what we know and what we do not know, an invitation to future researchers to continue the work of discovery. The story of human evolution is the story of who we are and where we came from, a story that connects us to all other life on Earth, that reveals our kinship with every organism that has ever lived, that places us in a cosmic context of time and change and transformation. It is a story that challenges simple narratives, that reveals complexity and contingency, that replaces certainty with wonder. It is a story that they do not fully teach you in schools, because it is too complicated, too messy, too full of mysteries and qualifications. But it is a story worth knowing, a story that deepens our understanding of ourselves, a story that helps us see our place in the universe with clearer eyes. You are the product of this story, the latest chapter in a narrative that stretches back billions of years, the current endpoint of a journey that has no destination. Everything about you, from the structure of your cells to the thoughts in your mind, is the result of evolutionary processes operating over incomprehensible spans of time. You carry within you the legacy of fish and reptiles, of early mammals and primitive primates, of Australopithecines and Homo erectus, and all the other ancestors whose struggles and successes made your existence possible. You are continuous with the past, connected to all life, part of something much larger than yourself, and yet you are also unique. An individual like no other, a particular combination of genes and experiences that has never existed before and will never exist again. Evolution produces variation, and you are one variant among billions, a specific instance of humanity with your own thoughts and feelings and potential. You inherit the past, but you are not bound by it. You can learn, grow, change, become something different from what your genes and your upbringing might predict. The capacity for transformation is itself part of your evolutionary heritage, the flexibility and adaptability that allowed your ancestors to survive in countless different environments, and that allows you to shape your own life in ways they could never have imagined. This is what they do not teach you about human evolution, that it is both determinative and liberating, both constraining and enabling, both the explanation for what you are and the foundation for what you might become. You are the product of evolution, but you are also an agent, capable of understanding your own origins and transcending them, capable of using your evolved brain to imagine possibilities that evolution itself could never have foreseen. Let me tell you more about the specific adaptations that made humans unique, the particular innovations that set us apart from other apes and allowed us to become the dominant species on Earth. These adaptations emerged gradually over millions of years, each building on what came before, each opening new possibilities that led to further changes. The first great adaptation was bipedalism, walking on two legs. This seems simple, but it was revolutionary. No other ape walks upright as their primary means of locomotion. Bipedalism freed our hands for other purposes, allowed us to carry food and tools and infants, let us see over tall grass to spot predators and prey, and may have made us more efficient at covering long distances. The evolution of bipedalism required extensive changes to the skeleton, from the feet to the spine to the skull, changes that can be traced in the fossil record over millions of years. We do not know exactly why bipedalism evolved. Perhaps it was an adaptation to life in open grasslands, where seeing over vegetation was important. Perhaps it was an adaptation to carrying food. Perhaps it was an adaptation to freeing the hands for tool use. Whatever the cause, bipedalism was the first step toward humanity, the foundation on which everything else was built. The second great adaptation was tool use and tool making. Other animals use tools, of course. Chimpanzees use sticks to extract termites, crows use twigs to retrieve food, sea otters use rocks to crack shellfish. But human tool use goes far beyond anything seen in other species. We make tools to make other tools. We plan ahead, crafting implements for future use. We pass tool-making skills from generation to generation, accumulating improvements over time. We have invented technologies that extend our capabilities far beyond what our bodies alone could achieve. The earliest stone tools appear in the archaeological record about 3.5 million years ago, simple flakes struck from rocks. Over millions of years, tool-making became more sophisticated, producing hand axes, spear points, needles, and eventually the complex technologies of the modern world. Tool use shaped our evolution, creating selection pressures for brains and hands that could make and use tools more effectively, driving the feedback loop between biology and culture that made us who we are. The third great adaptation was the control of fire. I discussed this earlier in the context of cooking, but fire had many other benefits. Fire provided warmth, extending the habitats where humans could live. Fire provided light, extending the hours when humans could be active. Fire provided protection, keeping predators at bay. Fire provided a social focus, a gathering place where groups could come together, share food, tell stories, reinforce bonds. The control of fire may have been the most transformative technology in human history, enabling all the other adaptations that followed. We do not know exactly when humans first controlled fire. Some evidence suggests it may have been as early as 1 million years ago. By 400,000 years ago, evidence of fire use is widespread, indicating that our ancestors had mastered this technology and were using it regularly. The fourth great adaptation was language. I discussed this extensively earlier, but let me add a few more thoughts. Language is not just a communication system, but a tool for thought. With language, we can manipulate symbols in our minds, reasoning about abstract concepts that have no physical existence. We can imagine hypothetical scenarios, planning for futures that may never come. We can construct complex arguments, building chains of logic that lead to conclusions far removed from immediate experience. Language expanded the capabilities of the human mind, making possible forms of thought that would otherwise be inconceivable. The fifth great adaptation was cumulative culture, the ability to accumulate knowledge and skills across generations. Other animals have culture, behaviors that are learned rather than instinctive, that vary between groups, that are transmitted socially. But human culture is unique in its cumulative nature. Each generation does not start from scratch but builds on what previous generations achieved. The tools we use today are the product of thousands of years of innovation, each improvement building on earlier improvements, producing technologies that no individual could have invented alone. Cumulative culture allowed humans to adapt to new environments far faster than genetic evolution could manage, spreading across the globe and developing local adaptations within generations rather than millennia. These 5 adaptations, bipedalism, tool use, fire, language, and cumulative culture, together created a new kind of animal, a creature capable of reshaping its environment rather than merely adapting to it, a species that could extend its reach through technology rather than being limited by biology, an organism that could escape the constraints that bind all other life. We are that creature, inheritors of millions of years of evolutionary innovation, beneficiaries of adaptations that make possible everything we are and everything we do. Let me tell you about the dark side of human evolution, the aspects of our nature that cause suffering and conflict, the legacy of adaptations that served our ancestors but create problems in the modern world. Evolution does not produce perfection. It produces organisms that are good enough to survive and reproduce in their environments, organisms shaped by past challenges that may not be well suited to present circumstances. Many of the problems we face today have roots in our evolutionary history, in adaptations that made sense for our ancestors but create difficulties for us. Consider obesity. Human bodies evolved in environments where calories were scarce and uncertain. Our ancestors needed to eat when food was available, storing energy as fat for lean times ahead. The preference for sweet and fatty foods, the tendency to overeat when food is abundant, these were adaptive in environments of scarcity. But they are maladaptive in environments of abundance, where cheap, calorie-dense food is available everywhere. The obesity epidemic is partly a mismatch between evolved preferences and modern environments. Our ancient bodies struggling to cope with a food landscape that would have seemed like paradise to our ancestors. Consider anxiety and depression. Human minds evolved to be vigilant, to scan the environment for threats, to worry about dangers that might arise. A certain level of anxiety was adaptive, keeping our ancestors alert to predators and enemies, motivating them to prepare for challenges ahead. But in modern environments, where genuine physical threats are rare but psychological stresses are constant, this vigilance can become pathological. Anxiety disorders and depression may be partly the result of threat detection systems that are miscalibrated for modern life, ancient mechanisms firing in response to stimuli that are not actually dangerous. Consider violence and aggression. Human evolution involved competition for resources and mates, conflicts that sometimes turned violent. Our ancestors who could fight effectively, who could intimidate rivals, who could defend their families and territory, often had advantages in survival and reproduction. The capacity for violence is part of our evolutionary heritage, written into our brains and our hormones. We are capable of terrible cruelty, of wars and genocides and tortures that seem almost incomprehensible. This capacity evolved because it was sometimes useful, because our ancestors who could deploy violence effectively sometimes survived when others did not. Understanding the evolutionary roots of violence does not excuse it, but it helps explain why it persists despite our best efforts to create peaceful societies. Consider tribalism and prejudice. Human evolution occurred in small groups, bands of related individuals who cooperated with each other while competing with other bands. This created selection for in-group favoritism, for loyalty to one's own group and suspicion of outsiders. The tendency to divide the world into us and them, to favor people who seem similar and distrust people who seem different, has roots in this evolutionary history. In the modern world, where we encounter far more diversity than our ancestors did, this tribal psychology can lead to racism, nationalism, and other forms of prejudice. Understanding the evolutionary roots of tribalism helps explain why it is so persistent and so difficult to overcome. These dark aspects of human nature are not destiny. We have the capacity to overcome our evolutionary legacy, to build cultures and institutions that channel our nature in constructive directions. But we cannot overcome what we do not understand. Recognizing the evolutionary roots of our problems is the first step toward addressing them, toward creating a world that works with human nature rather than against it. Let me tell you about hope, about the aspects of human evolution that give us reason to be optimistic, that suggest we are capable of building a better future than our past might predict. Evolution produced not only our capacity for violence and tribalism, but also our capacity for cooperation and compassion, our ability to care for others, to sacrifice for the group, to imagine a better world and work to create it. Human cooperation is remarkable. We cooperate with non-relatives, with strangers, with people we will never see again. We cooperate on scales that would be impossible for any other species, creating institutions and organizations that span continents and coordinate the actions of millions. This capacity for large-scale cooperation is an evolutionary innovation, a product of adaptations for social life that have been elaborated by culture into something unprecedented. Our ability to cooperate is what allows us to address collective challenges, from building cities to fighting diseases to confronting climate change. Human empathy is remarkable. We feel the pain of others, even others we do not know, even others who are different from us. We can imagine what it is like to be someone else, to see the world through their eyes, to care about their welfare. This capacity for empathy is an evolutionary adaptation, rooted in the social nature of human life, but it has been extended by culture to encompass all of humanity and even other species. Our ability to empathize is what makes morality possible, what allows us to care about justice and fairness, what motivates us to help those in need. Human creativity is remarkable. We imagine things that do not exist and then create them. We solve problems that have never been solved before. We invent technologies that would have seemed like magic to our ancestors. This capacity for creativity is an evolutionary innovation, rooted in the flexibility and adaptability of the human mind, but it has been amplified by culture into something that can reshape the world. Our ability to create is what gives us hope for the future, what suggests that the problems we face are not insurmountable, what makes us capable of building a better world. These hopeful aspects of human nature are as much a part of our evolutionary heritage as the dark aspects. We are capable of both great cruelty and great kindness, both terrible destruction and remarkable creation. The future is not determined by our genes, but by the choices we make, by the cultures we build, by the institutions we create. Understanding our evolutionary nature helps us make better choices, helps us build cultures that bring out the best in us, helps us create institutions that channel our nature in positive directions. The story of human evolution is ultimately a story of possibility. We are animals shaped by the same processes that shaped all other life, subject to the same constraints and limitations. But we are also something new, something unprecedented, a species that can understand its own origins and choose its own direction. We are the product of evolution, but we are also the agents of our own future. What we do with that agency is up to us. As you lie here tonight on the edge of sleep, consider what it means to be human. You are the inheritor of 4 billion years of evolution, the latest chapter in a story that began with the first self-replicating molecules and has unfolded through countless forms of life to produce you. You carry within you the adaptations of fish and amphibians, of reptiles and mammals, of primates and hominins. You are continuous with all life, connected to every organism that has ever existed by unbroken chains of descent. You are part of something vast and ancient, a cosmic process of creation and transformation that has been operating since the universe began. And yet you are also unique, a specific individual with your own thoughts and feelings and potential. The particular combination of genes and experiences that makes you who you are has never existed before and will never exist again. You have a brief time on this earth, a moment in the vast sweep of evolutionary time, and what you do with that time matters. You can learn and grow and change. You can contribute to the welfare of others. You can add your own small chapter to the ongoing story of human evolution. This is what they do not teach you about human evolution, that it is not just a scientific topic to be studied, but a personal reality to be lived. Your evolution in action, a process rather than a product, a story still being written. Your life is part of the story, your choices are part of the story, your hopes and fears and dreams are part of the story. What happens next is partly up to you. The night is deep now, and sleep is calling. You have travelled through millions of years of evolutionary history, from the first hominins who walked upright on the African savanna to the complex, culture-bearing, language-using creatures that we have become. You have learned about the many human species that came before us, about the near-extinctions we survived, about the adaptations that made us unique, about the mysteries that remain unsolved. You have learned about the vestiges in your body, the evolutionary compromises in your design, the ancient circuits in your brain that still influence your behavior. You've learned about the dark side of human nature and the reasons for hope, about the capacity for violence and the capacity for cooperation, about the challenges we face and the resources we have to meet them. All of this knowledge is now part of you, settling into your mind as you drift towards sleep. It is knowledge that connects you to your ancestors, to all the humans who came before you and made your existence possible. It is knowledge that connects you to all other life, to the vast web of organisms with which you share this planet and with which you share common ancestry. It is knowledge that connects you to the future, to the generations yet to come who will inherit what you and your contemporaries create. Sleep now, knowing who you are and where you came from. Sleep now, inheritor of 4 billion years of evolution, carrier of ancient adaptations and ancient possibilities. Sleep now, human being, product of countless accidents and narrow escapes, survivor of extinctions and catastrophes, descendant of all the creatures who lived and died so that you could be here tonight. The story of human evolution is your story. It is written in your genes and your bones and your brain. It is the reason you exist, the explanation for what you are, the context for everything you do. Carry it with you as you sleep, and carry it with you when you wake. You are part of something vast and ancient and ongoing, your evolution's latest experiment, its current frontier, its hope for the future. Tomorrow you will wake and continue your life, facing your own challenges, making your own choices, adding your own chapter to the story. You will bring to those challenges the gifts that evolution has given you, the upright body, the skilled hands, the large brain, the capacity for language and cooperation and creativity. You will also bring the limitations and compromises, the fears and biases, the ancient circuits that sometimes work against you. But you will have something your ancestors did not have: knowledge of your own evolutionary history, understanding of why you are the way you are, insight into the processes that shaped you. This knowledge is power. It helps you understand yourself, helps you understand others, helps you navigate the complex world you inhabit. It does not solve all problems or answer all questions, but it provides a framework, a way of making sense of the human condition, a perspective that connects the personal to the cosmic. You are the product of human evolution, but you are also its agent, its continuation, its future direction. What happens next depends partly on you, on the choices you make, on the life you live, on the contributions you offer to the ongoing story. This is the burden and the privilege of being human, of being the species that can understand its own origins and contemplate its own destiny. Rest now in that understanding. Let the knowledge of your evolutionary heritage settle into your bones as you drift towards sleep. You come from a long line of survivors, from ancestors who faced challenges far greater than anything you will encounter and found ways to persist. Their strength is your strength. Their resilience is your resilience. Their story is your story. The night holds you gently, as it has held your ancestors for millions of years. Sleep has been part of mammalian life for over 200 million years, a daily retreat into unconsciousness that allows the brain to consolidate memories and the body to repair itself. When you sleep, you join a tradition older than humanity itself, a rhythm of waking and sleeping that connects you to all the creatures who have ever closed their eyes and drifted into dreams. Dream now of your ancestors, of the long journey that led to you. Dream of walking upright on the African savannah, of making the first stone tools, of mastering fire and language and culture. Dream of the ice ages survived, the continents crossed, the challenges overcome. Dream of all the human species that came and went, the Neanderthals and Denisovans and Homo erectus and all the others, your relatives who shared this earth and then vanished, leaving only us. Dream of the future, of the human story yet to be written, of the possibilities that lie ahead. Dream of what humanity might become, of the challenges we might overcome, of the worlds we might explore. Dream of your own contribution to this story, however small, however brief, part of something much larger than yourself. And when you wake, carry these dreams with you. Carry the knowledge of your evolutionary heritage, the connection to your ancestors, the hope for the future. You are human, the product of 4 billion years of evolution, the inheritor of adaptations that make possible everything you are and everything you might become. This is what they do not teach you about human evolution. This is the story they leave out, the complexity they simplify, the mystery they gloss over, Now you know, now it is part of you, now you can sleep. The fire burns low, the night is quiet, the world turns as it has turned for 4 billion years, carrying you on its surface, one human among billions, one moment in the vast sweep of time. Sleep well, inheritor of evolution. Sleep well, carrier of ancient adaptations. Sleep well, human being. The story continues, and you are part of it. Let me take you even deeper into the hidden stories of human evolution, into the details they never mention, into the fascinating specifics that make our evolutionary journey so remarkable. The night is long, and there is so much more to tell, so many more connections to draw between the ancient past and your present existence. Let me tell you about the evolution of human birth, one of the most dramatic and dangerous events in the mammalian world, shaped by the competing demands of big brains and upright walking. Human birth is uniquely difficult among primates. Other apes give birth relatively easily, their infants passing through the birth canal without the twisting and turning that human infants must perform. But human babies have such large heads, and human pelvises are so constrained by the demands of bipedalism that birth becomes an ordeal, a tight squeeze through a passage that barely accommodates the infant's skull. The human pelvis is a compromise shaped by two contradictory demands. For efficient walking, the pelvis should be narrow, keeping the legs close together, minimizing the energy required for locomotion. For easy birth, the pelvis should be wide, providing ample room for the infant to pass through. Evolution has tried to satisfy both demands, producing a pelvis that is neither optimal for walking nor optimal for birth but adequate for both. The result is that human childbirth is more dangerous than it needs to be, more painful than it should be, more likely to result in complications than the births of other primates. The difficulty of human birth has shaped human societies in countless ways. It has created the need for assistance during labour, for midwives and birth attendants, for social support during one of life's most vulnerable moments. It may have contributed to the evolution of human cooperation, as individuals who helped others give birth ensured the survival of more group members, strengthening the bonds that hold communities together. Let me tell you about the evolution of human childhood, that long period between infancy and adulthood that is unique to our species. Other primates have childhoods too, but none are as extended as the human childhood. None involve as much learning and development. None require as much investment from parents and communities. Human children take 15 to 20 years to reach full maturity, far longer than any other primate, far longer than our body size would predict. Why do humans have such long childhoods? The most likely answer is that we have so much to learn. The human way of life depends on skills and knowledge that cannot be inherited genetically, but must be acquired through experience and instruction. Learning to make tools, to find food, to navigate social relationships, to communicate effectively, to master the thousands of details that make survival possible in human societies, all of this takes time. A long childhood provides that time, creating a period during which children can learn from adults without having to fend for themselves. Let me tell you about the evolution of menopause, a topic they almost never discuss in classrooms. Human females stop reproducing decades before the end of their lives, a pattern that is rare in the animal kingdom and seems, at first glance, to be evolutionarily disadvantageous. Why would evolution favour a trait that causes females to stop reproducing while they are still healthy? The most widely accepted explanation is the grandmother hypothesis. According to this theory, post-reproductive women can increase their evolutionary fitness by helping to raise their grandchildren rather than continuing to have children of their own. Human children require so much care for so long that mothers benefit enormously from help. Grandmothers can provide that help, freeing mothers to have more children, improving the survival of existing children, transmitting knowledge and skills across generations. A grandmother who stops reproducing and focuses on helping her grandchildren may leave more descendants than a grandmother who continues reproducing into old age. Let me tell you about the evolution of human pair bonding, the tendency for human males and females to form long-term partnerships that are rare among other great apes. Chimpanzees and bonobos are promiscuous, gorillas form harems, orangutans are mostly solitary, but humans tend to form pair bonds, partnerships between one male and one female that can last for years or even lifetimes. Why did human pair bonding evolve? One theory emphasizes the demands of child-rearing. Human children require so much care for so long that two parents may be better than one, with fathers providing food, protection, and teaching, that increase the survival of offspring. Pair bonding ensures paternal investment, giving fathers confidence that they are investing in their own genetic offspring. Another theory emphasizes the importance of male coalitions. In many traditional societies, men form alliances with other men for hunting, warfare, and other cooperative activities. Pair bonding reduces sexual competition by giving each male a dedicated partner, freeing men to cooperate with each other rather than competing for access to women. Let me tell you about the evolution of human sexuality, a topic that is often avoided in discussions of evolution. Human sexuality is unusual in many ways, different from the sexuality of other apes. Consider the fact that human females are sexually receptive throughout their menstrual cycles, not just during a brief fertile period, as in many other primates. In most mammals, females are only sexually receptive when they are ovulating, advertising their fertility through physical and behavioral changes. But human females can engage in and enjoy sex at any time, and the timing of ovulation is concealed, not obvious from external signs. This concealed ovulation and continuous sexual receptivity may have evolved to strengthen pair bonds, encouraging frequent sexual activity that maintains the emotional connection between partners. Consider the fact that human females have permanent breasts, present throughout adulthood regardless of whether they are nursing. In other primates, breasts enlarge during nursing and shrink afterward, but human breasts remain enlarged even when a female is not lactating, serving as a visual signal that may play a role in mate attraction. Let me tell you about the evolution of human aesthetics, our sense of beauty and our appreciation for art. The capacity to perceive beauty, to be moved by music and painting and poetry, to create and appreciate art, is one of the most distinctively human traits. Other animals may have aesthetic preferences, but none approach the human obsession with beauty, the central role that aesthetics plays in human culture, the enormous resources that humans devote to creating and consuming art. Why did aesthetic appreciation evolve? One theory emphasizes the role of aesthetics in mate choice. If certain aesthetic preferences signal good genes or good health, then individuals who could perceive and appreciate these signals would have advantages in choosing mates. Beauty may be a marker of genetic quality, of health, of youth, of traits that would make someone a good partner and parent. Another theory emphasizes the role of aesthetics in social bonding. Creating and sharing art may strengthen social connections, building trust and cooperation among group members. Music and dance, which are found in every human culture, may have evolved partly to coordinate group activities, to signal group membership, to create the emotional bonds that hold communities together. Let me tell you about the evolution of human religion and spirituality, another distinctively human trait that raises fascinating evolutionary questions. Every known human culture has some form of religious belief, some concept of supernatural beings or forces, some practices aimed at communicating with or influencing the supernatural. This universality suggests that religion is not merely a cultural invention, but has roots in human psychology that may have been shaped by evolution. Why might religious belief have evolved? One theory emphasizes the role of religion in explaining the unexplainable. Human minds evolved to seek causes, to understand why things happen, to predict and control events. But many events are beyond human understanding or control. Death, disease, natural disasters. Religion provides explanations for these mysteries, attributing them to supernatural agents whose actions can be understood and perhaps influenced. By providing explanations, religion reduces anxiety and creates a sense of meaning and control. Another theory emphasizes the role of religion in promoting cooperation. Religious beliefs often include moral codes, commandments about how to treat others, promises of reward for good behavior and punishment for bad behavior. These beliefs can promote cooperation by creating shared values and expectations. Let me tell you about the evolution of human morality, our sense of right and wrong, our feelings of guilt and shame and indignation. Moral intuitions are found in every human culture, though the specific content of moral codes varies. This universality suggests that morality has roots in human psychology that may have been shaped by evolution. The evolution of morality is closely connected to the evolution of cooperation. Humans are remarkably cooperative, working together on scales that would be impossible for any other species. But cooperation creates opportunities for cheating, for individuals who take the benefits of cooperation without paying the costs. Morality may have evolved partly as a system for regulating cooperation, for identifying and punishing cheaters, for encouraging contributions to collective efforts. Moral emotions like guilt and shame motivate us to follow moral rules even when no one is watching. Moral emotions like anger and indignation motivate us to punish rule breakers, even at cost to ourselves. These emotions create a system of internal and external enforcement that makes cooperation more stable. Let me tell you about something they definitely do not teach you: the evolution of human self-deception. We like to think of ourselves as rational beings, accurately perceiving reality and making decisions based on evidence and logic. But evolutionary psychology reveals that humans have a remarkable capacity for self-deception, for believing things that are not true, for seeing ourselves and our situations in ways that are systematically biased. Why would evolution favor self-deception? One theory emphasizes the social benefits. If you believe your own lies, you're more convincing when you tell them to others. Self-deception may have evolved to make us better deceivers, to help us manipulate others by first manipulating ourselves. Another theory emphasizes the motivational benefits. Overconfidence may motivate us to attempt challenges that we would otherwise avoid, leading to success that would not have occurred if we had accurately assessed our abilities. Optimism may help us persist in the face of setbacks, leading to eventual success that pessimists would never achieve. Let me tell you about the evolution of human sleep, that mysterious state you're drifting toward right now. Sleep is universal among animals with nervous systems, suggesting that it serves essential functions that cannot be sacrificed. But what are those functions? Why do we spend about a third of our lives unconscious, vulnerable, unproductive? The full answer remains uncertain, but research has revealed several important functions of sleep. Sleep is when the brain consolidates memories, transferring information from short-term to long-term storage, strengthening the neural connections that encode what we have learned. Sleep is when the brain clears waste products that accumulate during waking hours, flushing out toxins that would otherwise impair function. Sleep is when the body repairs itself, when growth hormone is released, when the immune system is strengthened. Sleep deprivation has devastating effects on cognition, emotion, and health, demonstrating how essential sleep is for normal function. Human sleep has evolved to fit human needs. We sleep in a single consolidated block, unlike many animals that sleep in multiple short periods throughout the day and night. This consolidated sleep may have evolved because our ancestors needed to be active during the day, when vision was most useful, and safe during the night, when predators were most dangerous. The invention of fire may have contributed to consolidated sleep, providing warmth and protection that made sleeping through the night safer. The social nature of human life may also have contributed, as sleeping in groups provides safety and warmth that solitary sleeping cannot match. Let me tell you about the evolution of human dreaming, those vivid experiences that occur during sleep, and that have fascinated humans throughout history. Dreams occur primarily during REM sleep, a phase of sleep characterized by rapid eye movements, paralysis of voluntary muscles, and brain activity that resembles waking. The function of dreaming remains debated, but several theories have been proposed. One theory suggests that dreams are a side effect of memory consolidation, the random activation of neural circuits as the brain processes information from the day. Another theory suggests that dreams serve a simulation function, allowing us to practice responses to threatening or challenging situations without the risks of real-world practice. Yet another theory suggests that dreams serve an emotional regulation function, helping us process difficult emotions and integrate them into our psychological lives. Whatever the function of dreams, they are a universal human experience, reported in every culture, interpreted in countless different ways, a window into the unconscious workings of the mind. Let me tell you about the evolution of human intelligence, that remarkable capacity that allows you to understand these words and contemplate your own existence. Intelligence is notoriously difficult to define and measure, but by any reasonable definition, humans are the most intelligent species on Earth, capable of cognitive feats that no other animal can match. How did human intelligence evolve? What were the selection pressures that drove the expansion of cognitive abilities? Several theories have been proposed. The ecological intelligence hypothesis emphasizes the cognitive demands of finding food in variable environments. Our ancestors needed to remember the locations of resources, to plan ahead, to develop tools and techniques for extracting food from difficult sources. These demands may have selected for larger brains and more sophisticated cognitive abilities. The social intelligence hypothesis emphasizes the cognitive demands of living in complex social groups. Our ancestors needed to track relationships, to predict behavior, to cooperate and compete effectively. These demands may have selected for abilities like theory of mind, the capacity to understand that others have beliefs and desires different from our own. The cultural intelligence hypothesis emphasizes the feedback between brains and culture. Once our ancestors began developing tools and language, these cultural innovations created new selection pressures for brains that could use them more effectively, leading to a runaway process of increasing cultural complexity and increasing intelligence. Let me tell you about the evolution of human memory, that capacity to store and retrieve information that is essential for everything we do. Memory is not a single system, but a collection of systems, each evolved for different purposes, each operating according to different principles. Episodic memory stores personal experiences, the events of our lives, the what and when and where of things that happen to us. Semantic memory stores general knowledge, facts about the world that are not tied to specific experiences. Procedural memory stores skills and habits, the how-to knowledge that allows us to ride bicycles and tie shoes without conscious thought. Working memory holds information temporarily while we use it, allowing us to manipulate ideas and solve problems. Each of these memory systems evolved because it served adaptive functions, because remembering certain kinds of information helped our ancestors survive and reproduce. Episodic memory may have evolved to support planning, allowing our ancestors to use past experiences to anticipate future challenges. Semantic memory may have evolved to support learning, allowing knowledge to be extracted from experiences and applied to new situations. Procedural memory may have evolved to support skill acquisition, allowing complex behaviors to be automated so that conscious attention could focus on other things. Let me tell you about the evolution of human attention, that capacity to focus mental resources on specific aspects of the environment while ignoring others. Attention is essential for survival in a complex world where we cannot process everything at once. Our ancestors needed to notice predators and prey, to focus on tasks that required concentration, to shift attention rapidly when circumstances changed. The evolution of attention involved the development of neural systems that can enhance processing of relevant information while suppressing processing of irrelevant information. But attention is limited. We can only focus on a few things at a time, and focusing on one thing means missing others. This limitation is itself adaptive, forcing us to prioritize, to allocate our limited mental resources to the most important challenges. But it also creates vulnerabilities, opportunities for important information to be missed, for errors to occur when attention is divided or distracted. Let me tell you about the evolution of human decision-making, the processes by which we choose among options and commit to courses of action. Decision-making might seem like a purely rational process, weighing costs and benefits to identify the best choice. But evolutionary psychology reveals that human decision-making is shaped by biases and heuristics, mental shortcuts that usually produce good results but can sometimes lead us astray. These biases and heuristics evolved because they were efficient, because they produced decisions that were good enough for survival and reproduction without requiring the time and mental effort that fully rational analysis would demand. Consider loss aversion, the tendency to weigh losses more heavily than equivalent gains. Losing something feels worse than gaining something feels good, even when the objective value is the same. This bias makes evolutionary sense, because in ancestral environments, losses were often more dangerous than gains were beneficial. Losing food could mean starvation. Losing status could mean exclusion from the group. The asymmetry of consequences created selection for asymmetric evaluation, for treating losses as more important than gains. Consider the availability heuristic, the tendency to judge the probability of events based on how easily examples come to mind. Events that are vivid, recent, or emotionally charged seem more likely than events that are forgettable or abstract. This heuristic is usually adaptive because things that come to mind easily are often things that are common or important, but it can lead to errors when vivid examples are not representative, when rare events are overestimated because they are memorable. Let me tell you about the evolution of human emotion regulation, the processes by which we manage our emotional states, amplifying some emotions and suppressing others. Emotions evolved because they served adaptive functions, motivating behaviors that enhance survival and reproduction. But emotions can also be disruptive, interfering with long-term goals, damaging social relationships, causing suffering. The capacity to regulate emotions, to modulate their intensity and duration, evolved because it allowed our ancestors to use emotions adaptively without being controlled by them. Emotion regulation takes many forms. We can change our situations to avoid emotion-triggering stimuli. We can change our attention, focusing on neutral or positive aspects of situations rather than negative ones. We can change our interpretations, reframing events in ways that evoke different emotions. We can change our responses, suppressing emotional expressions or modifying the behaviors that emotions motivate. Each of these strategies has costs and benefits, and the ability to choose among them flexibly is itself an adaptive capacity. Let me tell you about the evolution of human stress responses, the physiological and psychological changes that occur when we face challenges or threats. The stress response evolved to prepare the body for action, to mobilize energy resources, to enhance focus and vigilance, to ready the organism for fight or flight. When our ancestors encountered predators or enemies, the stress response helped them survive, pumping adrenaline into the bloodstream, increasing heart rate and blood pressure, diverting blood to muscles, suppressing non-essential functions like digestion and immune response. This acute stress response was adaptive in ancestral environments where threats were immediate and physical, where the appropriate response was action rather than reflection. But in modern environments, where threats are often chronic and psychological, where action is often impossible or inappropriate, the stress response can become maladaptive. Chronic stress keeps the body in a state of constant mobilization, depleting energy resources, damaging tissues, impairing immune function, contributing to diseases ranging from heart disease to depression. Understanding the evolutionary origins of stress helps us see why modern life is so stressful and why our bodies respond so poorly to the kinds of threats we now face. Let me tell you about the evolution of human attachment, the deep emotional bonds that connect us to specific individuals, bonds that are formed in infancy and that shape our relationships throughout life. Attachment evolved because human infants are helpless, dependent on caregivers for survival far longer than the infants of any other species. An infant who formed strong attachments to caregivers, who sought their proximity, who protested when separated from them, was more likely to survive than an infant who was indifferent to caregivers. The attachment system motivates infants to stay close to caregivers, to seek comfort when distressed, to use caregivers as a secure base from which to explore the world. The patterns of attachment formed in infancy tend to persist into adulthood, shaping how we approach intimate relationships, how we respond to separation and loss, how we balance the needs for connection and autonomy. Secure attachment in infancy predicts secure attachment in adulthood. Insecure attachment in infancy predicts difficulty in forming and maintaining close relationships later in life. The echoes of our earliest relationships reverberate throughout our lives, a legacy of the evolutionary importance of the bond between infant and caregiver. Let me tell you about the evolution of human aging, that gradual decline in function that eventually leads to death. Aging might seem like an evolutionary puzzle. Why would evolution produce organisms that deteriorate and die when it could produce organisms that remain healthy and reproductive indefinitely? The answer lies in the mathematics of natural selection. Selection is weaker on traits that affect organisms late in life than on traits that affect organisms early in life. A gene that kills you at age 80 has little effect on your reproductive success because you have already passed your genes to the next generation. But a gene that kills you at age 20 has an enormous effect, preventing you from reproducing at all. This asymmetry means that genes with harmful late-life effects can spread through populations if they have beneficial early-life effects, or simply if they are not eliminated by selection. Aging is the accumulation of these late-life harmful effects, the result of selection's inability to weed out genes whose damage comes after reproduction is complete. This evolutionary perspective on aging helps explain why aging exists and suggests strategies for addressing it. If aging is caused by specific genes with late-life harmful effects, perhaps those effects can be blocked or reversed. If aging is the result of trade-offs between early life benefits and late-life costs, perhaps those trade-offs can be renegotiated through medical intervention. Let me tell you about the evolution of human death awareness, the knowledge that we will die that seems to be unique to our species. Other animals may fear immediate threats, but they do not appear to understand mortality in the abstract, to know that death awaits them regardless of whether threats are present. Humans know that they will die, and this knowledge shapes human psychology and culture in profound ways. The awareness of death creates existential anxiety, the dread of non-existence that philosophers have explored for millennia. But it also creates meaning, motivating us to make our lives count, to leave legacies, to seek significance that transcends our brief existence. The awareness of death may have driven the evolution of religion, of art, of the search for immortality through fame and offspring and cultural contribution. It is one of the distinctive features of human consciousness, a consequence of our cognitive abilities that brings both burden and benefit. Now you know what they do not teach you about human evolution. You know that evolution was not a straight line but a tangled bush, that many human species existed and all but one went extinct, that we came close to extinction ourselves on multiple occasions. You know that we interbred with other human species, that we carry their genes in our cells, that the boundaries between species were permeable. You know that many of our distinctive traits evolved recently, that evolution continues to operate on human populations, that our future evolution may be shaped by technologies we are only beginning to develop. You know that your body is full of evolutionary compromises and vestiges, that your psychology is shaped by adaptations for ancestral environments, that you're both constrained and enabled by your evolutionary heritage. You know that human evolution produced both the light and the dark, both the capacity for cooperation and the capacity for conflict, both the ability to create beauty and the ability to cause suffering. You know that we are part of nature, connected to all life, subject to the same processes that shaped every organism that has ever existed. And you know that we are also something new, something unprecedented, capable of understanding our own origins and choosing our own direction. This knowledge changes nothing and everything. It does not tell you how to live, what to value, what choices to make. But it provides context, perspective, understanding. It connects you to the vast sweep of evolutionary time, to the billions of years of history that produced you, to the countless ancestors whose struggles and successes made your existence possible. It reveals you to yourself as a product of evolution, shaped by forces you did not choose, carrying adaptations you did not request, inheriting a psychology that was designed for a world very different from the one you inhabit. And it reveals you as something more than a product, as an agent who can understand and transcend, who can use knowledge of evolutionary origins to make choices that evolution itself could never have anticipated. You're not trapped by your evolutionary heritage. You're informed by it, grounded in it, but not determined by it. The future is open, and what you do with your evolutionary inheritance is up to you. The night is deep now, and sleep is very close. You have travelled through millions of years of evolutionary history, learning things that textbooks leave out, understanding aspects of your existence that are rarely discussed. This knowledge is now part of you, integrated into your understanding of yourself and your place in the world. It will shape how you see yourself, how you understand others, how you think about what it means to be human. Sleep now, carrying this knowledge with you. Dream of your evolutionary ancestors, of the long journey that led to you, of the countless generations who lived and died so that you could exist. Dream of the other human species who shared this earth and are now gone, your relatives who vanished but left their traces in your DNA. Dream of the future, of what humanity might become, of the choices that lie ahead. And when you wake, remember what you have learned. Remember that you are the product of evolution, connected to all life, part of something vast and ancient and ongoing. Remember that you carry within you adaptations forged over millions of years, capacities that evolved because they helped your ancestors survive. Remember that you also have the capacity to transcend, to choose, to become something that evolution alone could never have produced. This is what they do not teach you about human evolution. Now you know. The night holds you gently. Sleep approaches. The long story of evolution has been told and you are its latest chapter. Rest now, inheritor of 4 billion years of life. Rest now, carrier of adaptations refined over countless generations. Rest now, human being, product of evolution and agent of the future. The ancestors are with you. The journey continues, and you are part of it. Let me tell you a few more secrets before you drift off completely. A few more hidden truths about human evolution that deepen everything we have discussed. These final revelations will settle into your mind as you sleep, becoming part of your understanding of what it means to be human. Let me tell you about the evolution of human laughter. That peculiar vocalization that seems to serve no obvious survival function but is found in every human culture and appears early in infant development. Laughter is so familiar that we rarely stop to consider how strange it is. What is the point of making those rhythmic sounds, of losing control of our breathing, of being briefly incapacitated by amusement? Why would evolution produce such a behavior? Research suggests that laughter evolved as a social signal, a way of communicating that we are not threatening, that we are willing to play, that the social situation is safe and friendly. Laughter is contagious, spreading from person to person, synchronizing moods and creating bonds. When we laugh together, we feel connected. We feel part of a group. We feel that our relationships are secure. This social function of laughter may have been crucial in ancestral environments, where group cohesion meant survival, where the ability to signal friendly intent could prevent conflicts and strengthen alliances. Laughter also appears to have benefits for physical and mental health. It reduces stress hormones, boosts immune function, releases endorphins, and generally makes people feel better. These health benefits may have been secondary effects of laughter's social functions, or they may have been selected for directly. Either way, the result is a behavior that simultaneously bonds us to others and improves our well-being, a double benefit that helps explain why laughter has persisted and spread. Let me tell you about the evolution of human crying, another mysterious behavior that seems uniquely human in its emotional form. Many animals produce tears to protect their eyes, but only humans cry emotional tears, tears that flow when we are sad or moved or overwhelmed by feeling. Why would evolution produce this strange response? Why would selection favor a behavior that blurs our vision and reveals our vulnerability? One theory suggests that emotional crying evolved as a signal of need, a way of communicating distress and soliciting help from others. Tears are hard to fake, making them an honest signal of genuine emotion. When we see someone crying, we know they are truly upset, and we are moved to comfort them, to help them, to address whatever is causing their distress. This signaling function of tears may have been crucial in ancestral environments, where getting help from others could mean the difference between survival and death. Another theory suggests that crying evolved partly for its physiological effects. Crying appears to help regulate emotion, to release tension, to return the body to a calmer state after intense feeling. The tears themselves contain stress hormones, suggesting that crying literally removes stress chemicals from the body. The deep breathing and sobbing that accompany crying may activate the parasympathetic nervous system, counteracting the stress response and promoting relaxation. Crying may be a self-regulatory mechanism, a way of managing emotions that evolved because it helped our ancestors cope with the intense feelings that social life inevitably produces. Let me tell you about the evolution of human blushing, that involuntary reddening of the face that occurs when we are embarrassed or ashamed. Blushing is unique to humans and has puzzled evolutionists since Darwin first called attention to it. Why would evolution produce a response that reveals our embarrassment, that makes our social discomfort visible to others? It seems like a liability, a giveaway that would be better suppressed. One theory suggests that blushing evolved as a signal of social awareness, a way of communicating that we recognize our transgressions and feel appropriately guilty. When we blush, we show others that we understand social norms, that we care about our reputations, that we are trustworthy members of the group who can be expected to follow rules. Paradoxically, blushing at our mistakes may actually enhance our social standing because it demonstrates our commitment to social norms. People who blush are seen as more likable, more trustworthy, more worthy of forgiveness than people who commit the same transgressions without blushing. Let me tell you about the evolution of human music, that universal art form that appears in every culture and affects us so deeply. Music seems like an evolutionary puzzle. It serves no obvious survival function, provides no calories or shelter, does not help us escape predators or attract mates in any direct way. And yet humans everywhere make music, listen to music, are moved by music in ways that suggest deep biological roots. Several theories have been proposed to explain the evolution of music. One suggests that music evolved for social bonding, creating shared emotional experiences that strengthen group cohesion. Singing and dancing together synchronizes bodies and minds, creating feelings of unity and belonging that may have helped our ancestors cooperate and coordinate. Another theory suggests that music evolved as a courtship display, a way of demonstrating cognitive abilities and genetic fitness to potential mates. The complexity and beauty of musical performance may signal underlying qualities that make someone a desirable partner. Yet another theory suggests that music evolved as an extension of mother-infant communication, the melodic speech that mothers use to soothe and connect with infants. This musical communication may have been elaborated over evolutionary time into the complex musical traditions we see today. Whatever the evolutionary origins of music, its effects on human psychology are profound. Music can induce powerful emotions from joy to sadness to awe. It can reduce pain, lower blood pressure, enhance immune function. It can create social bonds, mark group identities, accompany every significant ritual from weddings to funerals. Music is woven into human life in ways that suggest it is not merely entertainment, but something essential to what we are. Let me tell you about the evolution of human dance, that rhythmic movement of the body that accompanies music in every culture. Dance, like music, seems to serve no obvious survival function, and yet it appears universally in human societies, often in contexts that suggest deep importance. Why do humans dance? Dance may have evolved as a form of social signaling, communicating information about health, coordination, and genetic quality. The ability to dance well requires physical fitness, motor control, and the cognitive ability to synchronize movement with rhythm and with other dancers. These are exactly the kinds of abilities that might indicate good genes, making dance a form of honest signaling in mate choice. Dance may also have evolved for social bonding, creating the synchronized movement that generates feelings of unity and connection. When we dance together, we become attuned to each other, our movements and emotions aligned in ways that strengthen social bonds. Let me tell you about the evolution of human play, that seemingly purposeless activity that children engage in so readily and that persists into adulthood in various forms. Play appears in many species, but human play is unusually elaborate, continuing throughout life and taking forms that are unique to our species. Why do we play? Play serves several evolutionary functions. It provides practice for skills that will be needed later in life, allowing children to develop competencies without the risks of real-world performance. It teaches social rules, as children learn to cooperate, compete, negotiate, and resolve conflicts through play interactions. It develops creativity, as play encourages experimentation and the exploration of new possibilities. And it provides pleasure, rewarding engagement with activities that promote development and learning. The persistence of play into adulthood is particularly interesting from an evolutionary perspective. Many adult activities that we do not usually think of as play may actually be elaborations of playful impulses, sports and games, humor and teasing, creative arts, and intellectual exploration. The playful disposition that serves children so well may continue to serve adults, promoting the flexibility and creativity that are essential for coping with the novel challenges of human life. Let me tell you about the evolution of human imagination, that capacity to mentally represent things that are not present, that do not exist, that might never exist. Imagination is so central to human experience that we rarely stop to consider how remarkable it is. No other animal appears to have imagination in the human sense, the ability to construct rich mental simulations of hypothetical scenarios to explore possibilities that have never been actualized. Imagination may have evolved partly for planning, allowing our ancestors to mentally simulate future scenarios and prepare for challenges before they occurred. The ability to imagine what might happen, to consider different courses of action and their likely consequences, provided enormous advantages in a world full of uncertainty and danger. Imagination may also have evolved for social cognition, allowing us to imagine what others are thinking and feeling, to predict their behavior, to understand their perspectives. This social imagination is the foundation of empathy and theory of mind, capacities that are essential for navigating the complex social world of human life. The evolution of imagination opened up possibilities that had never existed before. Humans could not only respond to the world as it was, but could envision the world as it might be. We could imagine tools before we made them, imagine societies before we built them, imagine futures before we lived them. Imagination is the source of human creativity, the wellspring from which all art and science and technology flow. It is perhaps the most distinctively human capacity. the one that most clearly sets us apart from other animals. Let me tell you about the evolution of human storytelling, that universal practice of creating and sharing narratives that appears in every culture and seems to satisfy some deep human need. Stories are not merely entertainment. They are how humans make sense of experience, how we transmit knowledge, how we create meaning and purpose in our lives. Storytelling may have evolved partly as a way of transmitting survival-relevant information. Stories about successful hunts, dangerous encounters, and useful discoveries could spread valuable knowledge through communities, helping others avoid mistakes and exploit opportunities. The narrative format made information memorable, engaging emotional systems that enhance retention and recall. Stories may also have evolved as a way of teaching social norms, illustrating proper and improper behavior through characters who are rewarded or punished for their actions. The moral lessons embedded in stories may have helped maintain cooperation and coordination in ancestral communities. But storytelling goes beyond practical functions. Stories create meaning, providing frameworks for understanding our lives and our place in the world. They help us cope with uncertainty, providing templates for how to respond to challenges. They connect us to others, creating shared experiences and shared understandings that strengthen social bonds. Stories are how humans make sense of being human, how we transform the raw material of experience into something meaningful. Let me tell you about the evolution of human curiosity, that drive to explore, to understand, to learn, that seems to characterize our species more than any other. Humans are endlessly curious, asking questions, investigating mysteries, seeking to understand how things work. This curiosity has driven the accumulation of knowledge that defines human civilization, the scientific revolution, the technological innovations that have transformed our world. Curiosity may have evolved because knowledge is power, because understanding the world provides advantages in survival and reproduction. Our ancestors, who were curious about their environments, who explored and investigated and learned, were better able to find food, avoid dangers, exploit opportunities. The pleasure we feel when we discover something new, the satisfaction of understanding, may be evolution's way of motivating us to seek knowledge, rewarding the learning that enhances fitness. But human curiosity goes beyond what survival would require. We are curious about things that have no practical relevance, that will never affect our lives, that are simply interesting for their own sake. We want to know how stars form and how cells divide, and what happened billions of years ago in places we will never visit. This expansive curiosity may be a side effect of cognitive systems that evolved for more practical purposes, the same reward circuits that motivate useful learning also motivating useless but fascinating investigation. Let me tell you about the evolution of human consciousness itself, that mystery at the heart of our existence, the subjective experience of being that makes us feel like we are someone rather than just something. Consciousness is the most puzzling aspect of human existence, the one that philosophers have struggled with for millennia, the one that science has barely begun to address. We do not know how consciousness evolved or why it exists. We do not know whether it serves any adaptive function or is simply a byproduct of other cognitive processes. We do not know when consciousness first appeared in our lineage or whether other animals experience it. These are among the deepest questions we can ask, and they remain largely unanswered. What we do know is that consciousness exists, that you're experiencing it right now, that there is something it is like to be you reading these words in the darkness as you drift towards sleep. Whatever consciousness is, however it evolved, it is real and it is precious, and it is the medium through which all your experience occurs. The evolution of consciousness may have been the most significant event in the history of our lineage, the emergence of a new kind of being in the universe, a being that knows it exists, that wonders about its origins, that can contemplate its own consciousness with amazement and puzzlement. The night has grown very quiet now. The story of human evolution has been told as fully as one story can be told, revealing the hidden depths behind the simple narratives you learned in school, exposing the complexity and mystery that make our origins so fascinating. You have learned about the many human species and their fates, about the near-extinctions and the interbreeding, about the compromises in your body and the biases in your mind. You have learned about laughter and crying, blushing and music, imagination and storytelling and consciousness itself. All of this is part of what you are. All of this is written in your genes and your psychology and your very existence. You are the inheritor of 4 billion years of evolution, the product of countless experiments and accidents and selections, the latest chapter in a story that began before the Earth was formed and continues to this day. And yet you are also the author of your own story, the agent who can understand these origins and transcend them, who can use the gifts of evolution to create something new, something that evolution alone could never have produced. This is the paradox and the privilege of being human, to be shaped by forces beyond our control, and yet to have control, to be determined and yet to be free, to be the product of the past and the author of the future. Sleep now with this knowledge. Let it settle into your bones and your mind and your soul. Let it become part of how you understand yourself and your place in the world. You are evolution's latest creation, and you are also something more. You are human, with all that entails, with all the light and darkness, all the possibility and limitation, all the mystery and wonder that make us what we are. The journey of evolution continues. Every day, in every choice you make, you are adding to the story. What happens next is partly up to you. Rest now, child of evolution. Rest now, inheritor of billions of years. Rest now, human being. The ancestors watch over you, the future awaits you, and the present moment holds you in sleep. Let me share just a few more thoughts as you drift into dreams, a few more reflections on what it means to carry this evolutionary heritage, to be the product of so much history, to exist at this moment in the long story of life on Earth. Consider the improbability of your existence. Of all the individuals who could have been born at this moment in history, you are the one who was. Of all the possible combinations of genes, yours is the one that came together. Of all the paths that evolution could have taken, the one that led to you is the one that actually occurred. You are the product of countless accidents and narrow escapes, of matings that almost did not happen, of ancestors who almost did not survive, of evolutionary pathways that could easily have gone differently. The chain of causation that produced you stretches back billions of years, and at any point it could have been broken. But it was not. Here you are, against all odds, a conscious being contemplating your own improbability. This improbability should not make you feel insignificant. On the contrary, it makes you precious, unique, irreplaceable. There will never be another you, not in all the billions of years that life may continue on this planet or any other. The particular perspective you have on the world, the particular way you experience existence, the particular contribution you can make, these exist only in you and will exist only as long as you exist. Your improbability is your preciousness, your contingency is your uniqueness. Consider the continuity of your existence with all other life. You're connected to every organism that has ever lived by unbroken chains of descent, linked to the first cell that divided billions of years ago, related to every plant and animal and fungus and bacterium on Earth. The molecules in your body have been recycled through countless organisms before you, have been part of dinosaurs and trilobites and the earliest bacteria. The genes in your cells have been passed down through millions of generations, modified but continuous, a thread of information stretching back to the dawn of life. You are not separate from nature. You are nature, one of its many expressions, one of its countless experiments in being alive. This continuity should not make you feel ordinary. On the contrary, it connects you to something vast and ancient and ongoing, something much larger than any individual life. You are part of the story of life on Earth, a story that has been unfolding for billions of years and will continue for billions more. Your existence is a chapter in that story, your choices and actions part of its ongoing narrative. What you do matters, not just for your own life, but for the larger story of which you are a part. Consider the responsibility that comes with understanding. Now that you know what they do not teach about human evolution, now that you understand the hidden depths of your own origins, you carry a responsibility to use that understanding wisely. Knowledge of evolutionary psychology can help you understand your own biases and limitations, can help you make better choices, can help you be more compassionate toward yourself and others. Knowledge of our evolutionary heritage can help you appreciate what we share with other animals, can help you see the kinship that connects all life, can help you treat the natural world with the respect it deserves. But knowledge can also be misused. Evolutionary ideas have been twisted in the past to justify racism, sexism, and other forms of oppression. The fact that something evolved does not make it right, does not make it inevitable, does not make it something we must accept. Evolution describes what is, not what ought to be. We have the capacity to transcend our evolutionary heritage, to build societies that do not simply replicate the patterns of the past, to create futures that evolution alone could never have produced. Understanding our evolutionary origins gives us the power to choose, not the obligation to conform. Consider the mystery that remains. Despite everything science has discovered about human evolution, despite all the fossils and genes and comparative studies, the deepest questions remain unanswered. Why does consciousness exist? What is the meaning of life? How should we live? These questions cannot be answered by evolutionary biology, cannot be settled by scientific investigation, cannot be resolved by understanding our origins. They are questions that each person must grapple with, using whatever wisdom they can find, drawing on whatever resources their traditions and their reflections provide. The story of human evolution does not tell you how to live. It tells you where you came from, what you're made of, why you work the way you do. But the question of how to live, of what matters, of what deserves your commitment and care, this question remains open. Evolution produced you, but it did not produce your values. Those you must choose for yourself, in the light of everything you know and everything you feel, in dialogue with others who are grappling with the same questions, in the ongoing human conversation about what it means to live well. Consider the generations yet to come. Just as you are the inheritor of billions of years of evolution, you are also the ancestor of future generations who will inherit what you pass on. The choices you make, the world you help create, the values you embody and transmit, these will shape the lives of people who do not yet exist. You stand between the past and the future, receiving a heritage and passing it on, a link in a chain that stretches in both directions beyond the horizon of your own existence. What will you pass on? What will your contribution be to the ongoing story of humanity? These are questions worth considering, questions that give weight and significance to the choices you make each day. You cannot control what future generations will do with what you give them, any more than your ancestors could control what you would do with their gifts. But you can try to leave the world a little better than you found it, to pass on a heritage that is worthy of the heritage you received. The night is very deep now, and sleep is nearly complete. Your breathing has slowed, your muscles have relaxed, your mind is drifting toward dreams. The story of human evolution has been told, and now it becomes part of you, settling into memory, becoming part of how you understand yourself and your world. When you wake tomorrow, the world will look a little different. You will see your own hands and remember the long evolution of the primate hand, the millions of years of selection that shaped those remarkable instruments. You will hear your own voice and remember the evolution of language, the mysterious emergence of symbolic communication that made humanity possible. You will feel your emotions and recognize them as ancient adaptations, mechanisms that evolved because they helped your ancestors survive, feelings that connect you to all the humans who have ever lived. This knowledge is a gift and a responsibility. Use it wisely. Let it deepen your understanding of yourself and others. Let it enhance your compassion for the creatures who share this planet with you. Let it inspire your curiosity about the mysteries that remain unsolved. Let it ground you in the long story of life while also liberating you to write new chapters that evolution alone could never have imagined. You are the product of evolution, and you are more than the product of evolution. You are determined by your heritage, and you are free to transcend it. You are one among billions of humans, and you are utterly unique. These paradoxes are not contradictions to be resolved, but truths to be held together, aspects of the mystery of being human that make our existence so strange and so precious. Sleep well, inheritor of evolution. Sleep well, carrier of ancient genes. Sleep well, conscious being who can contemplate your own origins and wonder at your own existence. The story of human evolution is your story. The future of humanity is partly your future. And tonight, in the quiet darkness, you rest, gathering strength for whatever comes next. Let me leave you with one final thought, one last reflection to carry into dreams. The universe is vast and ancient, 14 billion years old, containing hundreds of billions of galaxies, each containing hundreds of billions of stars. In all that vastness, in all that time, on one small planet orbiting one ordinary star, life emerged. And from that life, after billions of years of evolution, consciousness emerged. And from that consciousness, After millions of years of further evolution, you emerged. You are the universe becoming aware of itself. You are matter that has learned to contemplate matter. You are the cosmos looking back at itself through evolved eyes, wondering at its own existence, asking questions that only a conscious being can ask. This is not poetry or metaphor. This is literally what you are. The atoms in your body were forged in the hearts of dying stars. The patterns in your brain were shaped by billions of years of evolution. You are stardust that has learned to wonder at the stars. This perspective should fill you with awe, not because you are important in the grand scheme of things, but because you are part of the grand scheme, because you participate in the cosmic story of matter becoming conscious, because your awareness is one of the ways the universe knows itself. What you experience, what you learn, what you understand, these become part of what the universe knows through you. Your consciousness is precious not because it will last, but because it exists at all. A brief flicker of awareness in the cosmic darkness, a moment when the universe opened its eyes in your particular corner of space and time. Sleep now, knowing what you are. Sleep now, child of stars and evolution. Sleep now, momentary window through which the cosmos contemplates itself. The night embraces you. The ancient heritage sustains you. The future possibilities await you. Tomorrow you will wake and continue your life, facing your own challenges, making your own choices, adding your own small contribution to the vast story of matter and energy and information and consciousness. That is the universe coming to know itself. What you do matters, not because you are large, but because you are part of something large, because your actions ripple outward in ways you cannot foresee, because the story of existence is written in part by what you choose to do. But for now, rest. Let the knowledge of your evolutionary heritage settle into peace. Let the awareness of your cosmic context bring not anxiety but wonder. Let the mystery of your own existence be not a problem to solve, but a gift to receive. You are human. You are alive. You are conscious. These are not small things. They are everything. The ancestors are at peace. The descendants await their time. And you, here and now, in this present moment, are exactly where you need to be. Good night, human. Good night, child of evolution. Good night, momentary miracle of consciousness. The journey continues. The story unfolds, and you are part of it. Sleep well. Sleep deep. Dream of ancestors and descendants, of stars and cells, of the long, strange journey from nothing to everything. And wake ready to continue the story that began so long ago and continues now, through you, into whatever future awaits. Remember what you learned tonight. Remember that human evolution was not a straight line, but a tangled bush with many branches, most now extinct. Remember that we nearly went extinct ourselves, multiple times, that our existence was never guaranteed. Remember that we interbred with other human species, that their genes live on in us, that the boundaries between species were never as firm as we thought. Remember that your body is full of evolutionary compromises and vestiges, evidence of the long journey written in your very flesh. Remember that your psychology was shaped for a world very different from this one, that your biases and instincts evolved for ancestral environments and sometimes mislead you in modern contexts. Remember that evolution produced both the light and the dark in human nature, both our capacity for cooperation and our capacity for conflict, both our ability to love and our ability to hate. Remember that understanding our evolutionary origins does not determine our future, that we can transcend our heritage, that the choices remain ours to make. Remember that you are the product of 4 billion years of evolution connected to all life, part of something vast and ancient. Remember that you are also unique, irreplaceable, precious in your particularity. Remember that you carry responsibility as well as heritage, that what you do matters, that the future is partly in your hands. Remember all of this, and let it shape how you see yourself and your world. Let it make you wiser, more compassionate, more humble, more curious. Let it ground you in the long story of life while freeing you to write new chapters. And now, finally, sleep. The night has held you through this long journey through evolutionary time. The darkness has cradled you as you learned the secrets they do not teach. The silence has wrapped around you as the story unfolded. Sleep deeply, sleep peacefully, sleep knowing who you are and where you came from. The morning will come, a new day will begin, and you will face it as what you truly are, a conscious being, evolved over billions of years, carrying ancient heritage into an unknown future, precious and temporary, and connected to everything. Good night, evolution's child. Good night, carrier of stardust. Good night, human being. Sleep now, dream now, rest now. You have earned this rest. You have travelled through millions of years of evolutionary history tonight, learning things that most people never learn, understanding your origins at a depth that few ever reach. This knowledge is now part of you, woven into your understanding, shaping how you will see yourself and your world from this night forward. The evolution of sleep itself is remarkable. Your ancestors slept, and their ancestors before them, back through mammals and reptiles and the earliest creatures with nervous systems. Sleep is ancient, conserved across hundreds of millions of years of evolution, essential for functions we are only beginning to understand. When you sleep, you join a tradition older than humanity, older than mammals, older than any creature with a brain like yours. In sleep, your brain processes what you have learned, consolidating memories, strengthening connections, integrating new information with old. Tonight, as you sleep, your brain will work on everything you have heard, weaving it into the fabric of your knowledge, making it part of who you are. When you wake, you will not remember every detail, but the essence will remain. A deeper understanding of your evolutionary heritage that will colour your perceptions and inform your choices. Dream of the long journey. Dream of your ancestors. Dream of the vast story of life unfolding on this small planet, and your own small but precious part in it. And when morning comes, rise refreshed, carrying the wisdom of the night into the light of day. The story of human evolution is complete for tonight, but it is never truly complete, because it continues in you, in every breath you take, in every thought you think, in every choice you make. You are evolution happening right now, the latest chapter in a story that has been unfolding for billions of years and will continue long after you are gone. Be worthy of this heritage. Honour your ancestors by living well. Contribute something to the ongoing story, and rest now, knowing that you are part of something much larger than yourself, something ancient and ongoing and beautiful. Sleep deeply, evolutionary being. Sleep peacefully, conscious miracle. Sleep well, human. Good night. Well.